Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 481. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge. I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the elder statesman of the podcast, the sensei of the whatnot, and the Duke of you know.
How's it going, eh?
Jim, on this podcast, we are going to be talking about Superman number 11, Batman number 11, and Flash number 11. We also bring back our Speeding Bullets segment, which we are lightly, I want to say lightly spoiler, because we really don't spoil in that segment. We kind of talk casually about some things that we've been reading or watching recently. They will be in the show notes, though, so if you want to avoid having anything spoiled in that segment, that's the place to check out what's going on that particular segment. But we do keep that very light and casual. It tends to be pretty spoiler-free, just kind of geeking out about some things that aren't on our typical topics. So we're bringing that segment back with this episode. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, and the InfiniteComics.com podcast partnership. Mr. Segulin, we are sponsored this episode by, once again, DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Can you tell us what's going on at DCBService.com?
Well, first off, as you know, and everyone knows it's coming, let's go bundles. You gotta love the bundle packages, multiple. They do 50% off on them. They give you a bundle package of variant covers where they do 40% off. You're saving some money. You're pulling this stuff together. It's one shop, one-click shopping, and it makes things a lot easier for me. But you know what else they have at DCBS, Sean?
What?
It's Morphin time! Justice League Power Rangers 6-issue miniseries crossover event. Outstanding. I saw this. I hooped and hollered because, once again, Power Rangers was another show that I watched. I'm seeing Justice League Power Rangers together. It looks like they're pulling the classic Power Rangers against one of the more classic Justice Leagues out there. Really looking forward to it. And DCBS is supporting this. Issue 1, 50% off. $199 for issue 1, plus multiple variant covers at 40% off. Check out what they've got. Thank you, DCBS.
I agree. That's DCBS has some really great deals right now. I didn't know about that Power Rangers one. I actually got to go back and modify my order. I missed that one. So thank you for pointing that one out. I sometimes miss these crossovers when they come out, and it's one of the great things I like about us having these communications is I can catch that one. I like those crossovers, so I will be jumping on that one. I am not a Power Rangers guy. But I'm interested in that. It's kind of the same way we were talking this episode about the He-Man Thundercats crossover. It's kind of the way I am with that. I feel like sometimes these crossovers get me into things that I'm not aware of previously. So I've been greatly enjoying these. I do want to remind everyone that they're a digital partner. So if you do Comixology or My Digital Comics, make sure to go to their website, link your account, and use their portal to do your shopping. You earn 5% of those purchases towards your DCB service order. Over at InStockTrades.com, they have the deals of the week and some really, really cool ones. They have the DC Rebirth Deluxe Edition hardcover, which is 50% off, only $8.99. They have the art of the DC Comics Bombshells hardcovers, 50% off, only $19.99. I miss things like this. There's the Watchmen Noir hardcover. It's 50% off, only $19.99. This is issues 1 through 12, the entire Watchmen series in black and white for the first time in a hardcover. I think that's really cool. Sweet Tooth, the deluxe edition. I'm a huge Sweet Tooth fan. Volume 3, hardcover, 50% off, only $14.99. That Omnibus, Flash by Francis Manapul and Brian Buccellato. Omnibus hardcover. Apologies for name butchery. 50% off, only $49.99. InStockTrades.com is your collected edition source. Mr. Segulin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on today's show. So, if you have read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk some comics.
The tiny earthling has foiled our mission. Let's get out of here.
Jim, with this episode, we're bringing back an old segment, actually, that we kind of abandoned, not deliberately, we just did. And it was something we've always liked doing, Speeding Bullets. And it won't necessarily be on every episode, but I definitely want to bring it back as, a couple times a month. Let's make sure we're doing one of these segments. It's just a chance to rant and rave about things that were a little unplanned that we wanted to talk about. One of the first books I want to shout out I read digitally, it just came out, the Batman 66 meets Wonder Woman 77. So it's the old Adam West Batman show meeting the Linda Carter show. It takes place, the initial issue, this is direct to digital, but I think with all of these, I think they do go to paper after they collect a certain number of them together. But what's cool about this one is it takes place when Bruce's parents are still alive, at least in the first issue. And he meets Diana from the first season. Because remember, the first season took place during the war? So it's the premise is that Bruce is really young. His parents are still alive. They're hosting a party, and there is a Nazi threat. So, I mean, it's really kind of cool because I loved season 1, but you can see how this sets up a premise for there to be a time jump to a later season of Wonder Woman with this, or actually stuff that maybe didn't happen on screen on Wonder Woman later, because if it's Batman 66 meets her, I wonder where the later part's going to take place. And it hasn't gotten to that yet, but it was a really cool team up. The writing's really strong on it. It's Jeff Parker and Mark Andreyko doing the writing on this. So it's an initial smaller offering because it's the first issue digitally, so it's not a full comic book issue, but they left it at a great cliffhanger. And the Eartha Kitt Catwoman's in it. It's Talia, Ra's al Ghul make an appearance in it. It's a big story, but Steve Trevor's there, Etta Candy's there. It's all the people that you would want to be a part of this, and Bruce's parents. So it's a really cool initial offering on this. I was geeking out because it's very well written. It's a lot of fun. So I recommend it for people that, maybe you don't normally read the comics associated with this. It's a well-done tie-in and something I never expected them to do. And it's just something that I want to make sure nobody passes up seeing, because it was I haven't had a chance to read a lot of my digital books lately, especially those direct-to-digital ones. And this one I really jumped on almost immediately because I'm like, wow, these are shows that I really grew up adoring, and they did them justice.
Well, and actually it does definitely go to paper because it's within one of the bundles.
Okay.
That they have out there. So I've got it ordered for, this month's bundles had issue 1. So yeah, I've got it ordered. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see it. It's
good. It's honestly the first off. Like when the next one comes out, which I believe is next week, I'm going to jump on it because it left me at a cliffhanger where I'm like, oh, I want to see what happens with this. And I'm being deliberately vague because I don't want to ruin it for anybody. But I gave you a lot in this, mm-hmm. and without really spoiling the premise of the story. And it's really cool. The artwork's great. It's got a Michael Allred cover. The interior artwork's done by a different art team, but their artwork's really great. It's very reminiscent of like the themes of these shows, and it just doesn't feel awkward at all. And I just was geeking out. The other one I actually want to mention, direct to digital, that I read was Injustice Ground Zero. Now, they've had an ongoing since the Injustice video game. This is a direct tie into the video game. It created this whole story world premise where Superman becomes a bad guy, and in that world. So it's the play is that it's heroes from our world going to an alternate world where these horrible events have happened. There's specific reasons why, and two of the catalysts of that are Harley Quinn and Joker. What happens with the whole thing? They've done like multiple years of this Injustice tie-in where they've continued the story from the video game. And the story's pretty rich. So, especially because of the fact that you have heroes from both worlds. It's the story of the game told from Harley's perspective. So you see things that happened off camera, but you also see the events unfold as told by Harley Quinn. So it's going to be, this is their next iteration of the story and where it's going. I'm loving it. Because she's so twisted. And what they do, though, that I think is really cool is you see her dialogue, but the real events unfold. So when she thinks like she's besties with people, you actually see their real reactions. So it's kind of cool that like you see like, okay, she's out of it. And it's clearly happening on the page where you see there's a certain sequence. I'll share this one. Batman's forcing her out of the cave. Because they're on the same team. I'm not going to say how that winds up being the case. It plays out in the story. But he's like giving her a mission because he's like, I got to get something done. I need her out of here. and he gives her like a genuine mission, but her perspective is, we're besties. We're best friends now. And look at this. It was great. It's a lot of fun. There's a serious tone to the story, though, too, because the events of the series are very, of the game itself, are pretty grim. I like that it's not afraid to have fun in that grim world. So the game's dark. It's very dark in its premise, especially when you're dealing with. There was a genuine reason why Superman snapped, and I'm not gonna. It's spelled out right in this first issue. So for those of you that you don't really need to have played the game. You don't need to have read any of the previous series to enjoy this first issue, because this is kicking off right from the beginning. It's telling you everything you need to know. So if you've never read any of the Injustice books, you never played the games, maybe you're excited for Injustice 2 because there's a second game coming. This is a great way to get your feet wet in the story in a very twisted fashion. It's fun. It was a lot of fun. I think there's like 8 of these digital issues out. They're 99 cents a piece. And that's a good way to get it as well. This I know they're collecting in paper for sure. So it's another one for people out there that are like, hey, I kind of want to understand the gaming story. This is a good way to go about it because it was fun. It was a fun first issue. So I just wanted to shout that one out as a thing that I love. Do you have anything that you read this week, Jim, that you want to...
You know what? I read Raven. I started the first 3 issues of Raven are out now, and her that miniseries she's got going. And I got to tell you, I jumped on it because when we had our Teen Titans discussion, she's on that team, and I was like, okay, who is this Raven? So then I went into it, and it's written by Marv Wolfman, so it's got good solid a person who's got a good solid understanding of the character, and I'm really digging this. This is they're dumping her into basically middle America kind of. It turns out her mother had a sister, and that sister has this typical suburb family, God-fearing suburb family, and she's getting dumped into this and dumped into high school life and all those weird things that just make her completely uncomfortable. And on top of it, there's this some supernatural entity that's stealing the souls of people. So she's got to deal with that as well, on top of being a high school student. So there's some neat stuff going on with the character, and just kind of getting a feel of who she is now in this universe, because this is different. Raven's one of those characters that keeps kind of shifting and changing throughout these incarnations in the DC universe. And I'm hoping we get a nice solid background now and a nice solid base for her, and we can actually start building on the character and developing her once again, because she's one of those where they kept a lot of the what is Raven, her father's Trigon, and if she loses control of her emotions, she could possibly unleash him to destroy the world. No pressure. So I like, she's always got that going on, and that's always weighing on her shoulders, and just her emotional connection, the empathy, and all that stuff that she has. And imagine throwing her in with a group of high school students whose emotions run completely every gamut of spectrum. That again, that's another thing that gets thrown at her, and she's got to interact and deal with people, and it's kind of a cool story, and I'm digging it. And I want to, especially seeing she's in the Titans, Teen Titans, I want to see who she is, and hopefully we can get some more out of her.
Yeah, it's really a good series, and I'm with you on the sense that I really want to wrap my head on who Raven is now. And I'd like just a definitive origin on her. I really like her in the Teen Titans series right now, so so far they're doing a really good job, I think, with this character. And let's define her. Let's put her on a team. Let's really go some depth. I think she was one really out of that whole crew that needed a miniseries the most, because I want this. Okay, who is she? What was our? Because I love the character of Raven, and I think she's somebody that really, I think in the New 52 they haven't really pinned down a true Raven yet. And I think this mini's doing a pretty good job of wrapping my head around that, and I'm liking that, because I really love the character. I'm a huge fan. Going back to the Wolfman and Perez run, and I felt like this is a character that kind of lost her way a bit, as far as I think they had some really good ideas with her, but I don't think there's been consistency. To your point, and I think the miniseries is really needed right now, so I'm thrilled. This is one of the things I'm loving with Rebirth. They seem to be really taking a critical eye to the universe and really pinning down things that they need to kind of flesh out and pin down and straighten up. And I'm loving that part. I'm really loving my reading right now for that, because I think they're really listening.
Yeah.
I mean, for lack of I think a lot of the things that people were critical about, that maybe you and I were a little bit more, I don't want to say forgiving, because I never felt like I was forgiving, but they didn't bother us. I guess it's probably the better way to do it. I was enjoying the stories that I was getting so much that I didn't really have an issue with. But it's clear that they're taking a look at their global audience, and we benefit from that, because I love a tighter continuity. I love when you start pinning down things about characters, and I like that when I read Superman, I'm just going to use Superman for an example. I love when I read Superman and his solo titles, that when I see him elsewhere, he feels like the same guy. I think there's a tight editorial going on right now, but I don't think it's strangleholded. I think there's a creativity going on as well. I think communication's a key. I think knowing the right levels of communication is pretty important in a comic company. I think trying to do that while having creative freedom in there is also important. I think we're getting some really strong creativity right now in comics. I think you have to know the line, and they seem to, in Rebirth, have a pretty good handle on the line. That's not to say that everything's perfect, but man, has this been fun. I honestly feel the same levels of excitement that I have previously. I'm talking about the initial launch issues, where you feel that kind of sense of new. And I will say this is where it's decidedly different for me than New 52. New 52, there was that Midnight Justice League issue that came out. I went to the comic shop. I grabbed a statue. I actually grabbed a statue of, it was one of those Eagle Moss die-cast metal ones. It was the Superman gold in the park with the eagle on it's a replica of the statue in the Superman park.
Cool.
Yeah, so I saw that and I'm like, oh, this is something neat. And it's not something I would normally have bought or sought out. I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know it existed. But it was kind of like a landmark of me going to that midnight sale, if that makes sense. Yeah. I'm like, oh, let me grab that. It's a cool thing at the shop. And I still have it on my shelf. I think it's awesome. But I remember that distinctly from that midnight sale. As the New 52 went on, I found myself really enjoying the series. You and I talked a lot the various series that spun out. And I was liking what was going on there. We lost some of our favorites, but we gained some new ones, and everything was going really well. But that sense of new dwindled at a certain point. The sense of wonder dwindled at a certain point. I was just really enjoying everything, but it wasn't like that, wow, they just did this, to the level that it is now. We got some books we're talking about on this one. One of them in particular, I'm a Batman and Superman junkie right now. I can't wait to talk about The Flash. Because there were some things that have happened in The Flash quite recently that I think is going to be part of our discussion that we have to really discuss. Because there's big things happening in this universe. And I like that they're subtle. There's certain things that'll happen where it's like, it's a single page where they throw you a bone. And they engross you into this larger story that's happening right now. That part I'm really digging. That's that sense of wonder, I think, that's coming out from all of this. And you're right with I think Raven is a great example of this. You read He-Man and Thundercats, right? The crossover?
Oh, God, yes.
I'm going to say something right now. I haven't had a chance to reach out to Freddie yet on this one. I'm hoping that he has some time in his schedule to come on the show. He's always been very good to us with time, but with conventions and things like that, I'm hoping we can get him on to talk about this book. Because I'm glad I can have my first conversation about this without him on the show, because I need this to be a genuine comment. This is one of the most beautiful things I've read in a long time. I'm talking about artwork, and I'm not just saying it because he's a friend of the show, because when I'm touting him on this one, I'm also touting the color work. I'm a big fantasy junkie. I love fantasy books. I'm a big fan of the J.R.R. Tolkien stuff, the Lord of the Rings, Hobbit. I grew up with that. That was my initial thing, but I'm even a bigger fan of Terry Brooks, the Shannara series. I love fantasy. I love, in video games, I tend to play a lot of the role-playing games that involve big expeditions and things like that. I'm a big Final Fantasy fan, things like that. I was a casual fan of He-Man and Thundercats. I had a He-Man action figure, actually, before I watched the show. But I watched, like, a series of episodes of He-Man. I would actually say out of the two properties, I'm a lot more familiar with He-Man than Thundercats. But I watched both and liked both. It was just at a time in my life where I wasn't able to watch all of the episodes. I don't remember if I had conflicts during that time or whatever it was. I didn't end up seeing them to the same level that a lot of people who are diehard devotees of both of these properties have. So I'm walking in as a casual fan. I really was picking this up because of Freddy's art. I was blown away by this. It's really a cool story. And I love that it treated you, if you were a fan that had any background to it, there's a lot of fan service in it. But it also, I don't remember a lot of the lore. So it was great to have that spelled out for me in a story that really is killer cool, because you've got really two princes here from both the Thundercats universe and the He-Man universe that are doing a lot of the narrative. And to see things right from Prince Adam, who is He-Man's perspective, and from Lion-O's perspective, and have those stories unfold, but also these rich villains that are really evil. I mean, I think the handling of the villains in this is not a fluff story. There's I honestly, I wanted to see this. I want to see this animated after this. And that's not taking away, I want the comic done first, but you know, a lot of times you're seeing a lot of these comic adaptations turned into these great animated features. This one needs to be, because, wow, is this a killer story? I love that there's this quest for power, you know, that's the fantasy element, right? You know, you want this quest for this instrument of power where the evil person, if they get a hold of it, they can take over everything. Well, I love that there's multiple people vying for this power. And in this case, it's the power of Grayskull, right? You know, it comes from the He-Man sword. I love how that leads into this just huge overarching story. I'm not going to spoil too much on this because I want to have Freddie on and we'll do something really spoiler. I hope, you know, he has some time for this. But the artwork, honestly, for me, I have a certain expectation on Freddie's art because I'm a big fan. This was kicked up, like, I don't want to say like a notch, because that doesn't feel like it's powerful enough for me. There seems to be a really strong relationship between his enthusiasm for this, what's going on with the colorist, the writing, the story. It just all came together in a way where this is special. If you're not a fan of these properties or never been exposed to them, this is your jumping on point, because it's a great story. I don't know if you're in the same place I'm at in this one. I'm drooling as I'm talking about this, because I've read this 4 times now, and when I say read this, the art read-through has now become a big thing for me on this. I am really in awe of the art. I want to know more about the lead. You know, did he have extra time on these issues? Because if not, I'm in awe. I don't know how you put together all this and make it happen so beautifully in this one, because it really came together as something special.
Man, dude, I was a big fan of both Thundercats and He-Man, and I was very excited, you know, just for the story being told, but also, like you, with Freddy's art. Come on, you know, you all know how much I love the artwork and I love his style. So I was this was a win-win-win for me, because the He-Man and Thundercats universe, those cartoons I was watching, had the action figures, had all that stuff. And the funny thing was, even as a kid, the one thing that used to annoy me was the villains, because they were that cartoony type of, so they were kind of idiots. And I always used to get angry at how stupid the villains were. And what they did in the comics is they made them more nasty. They made them more intelligent. They gave them a nice level of strategery that I was like, man, this is awesome. So I'm reading this going, this is how I wanted them to be back when I was a kid. So I was hooping and hollering. Just the level of evil and the level of nastiness that they had. But they still were the same character. So it's kind of neat. It's one of those things where when these two universes came together, the villains, the villains really started working well together because they're motivated by the same thing: greed, power, money, etc. So all that kind of fit why those two were working so well together. And right now we don't have the heroes working together yet, but it's coming. The team up's coming. And it's one of those anticipations that, because they show one side, then they're showing the other side, and that moment where the two teams start working together is going to be just kind of exciting. But it's neat because it's not just a geek fest for me on, Back to My Kids. They're advancing the stories, especially the story of Adam and his father, because it's the whole the whole in the animated He-Man universe, Adam was the secret identity for He-Man, and his father, of course, never knew that he was actually He-Man. Always kind of thought his son was a little bit of a wimp, and there was always multiple episodes where you could see him at odds, and and as a little kid, I'm just yelling at the TV, "Tell him already! Come on!" So they're doing some cool stuff with that story. It looks like, I'm hoping they get some more development going on the Thundercats side, but the Thundercats did a really good job with the evolution and the growth of those characters, but the villain side was always kind of weaker. So they're beefing up the villains on the Thundercats. They're beefing up the storyline on the people side of He-Man. I'm definitely looking forward to finishing up this story.
I liked that issue 2's narrative was Lino.
Yeah.
And to your point, the focus was more on the He-Man side, as far as it being a little more focused on Prince Adam. But I thought the dialogue from Lino showed a gradual shift. It's hard when you're doing this to balance both properties, and I thought that was a good way to handle it, because it built like an anticipation of where issue 2 ended. And I'm being deliberately vague on that, but I think that that was a good tool to remind us that this is an important part of this. I gotta say, this is something I'm really loving. I get excited now when I hear about various properties turning into comics, them fleshing them out and doing interesting things like these crossovers, because these used to be fluff pieces. And it seems strange to say that now, because they really aren't. I mean, there's been so many good ones in the last 5 years, and maybe beyond, but at least in the last 5 years, they've been doing some really terrific crossovers of properties that have really embraced what makes both properties cool. They do a lot of fan service while giving a depth-filled story. And that depth-filled story is pretty key to me. The artwork on this was stellar. I'm going to say something right now. I can't wait to see what Freddy's next project is. Because, oh my God. I mean, this was... Woof. And I'm not just saying this because he's been a friend of the show. I really am not. I'm diplomatic enough that, like, if I want to say nice things about somebody, I'm not going to overdo it. I think you can just say it was really nice art, and I really enjoyed the storytelling that was told there without going this far with it. This one struck me, which I think it's more of a compliment when it's an artist you know really well from their work, as opposed to somebody new. A lot of times, we're in awe of a new artist because you get a new sensibility. Somebody's bringing in a lot of different influences, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. I've never seen that before. It's always more impressive to me when you see an artist that's been established and somebody who you really like, and you see them honing their craft or really trying and experimenting with something new or doing something different, because in this case, it's a very fantasy-oriented world. And, woof, I geek out at fantasy artwork. I really love. One of my favorite Batman posters I have is by Yoshitaka Amano, and I'm probably totally butchering the name. He's done a ton of Final Fantasy art. I saw that he did a Batman poster, and I jumped on it. Just because his art style is so different than what you would expect to see in a traditional Batman comic, and I have it framed. It's actually in my basement. And the reason why I'm referencing that is I love fantasy artwork. It's just something that's really special to me. Freddie made it and did a unique thing. It's actually the whole art team on this one. Really just did a great job of embracing this world. The communication between them is clearly, and the story that's being told is clearly strong. This is a team effort, this book, and it just gelled really well. I hope this was a great experience for everybody involved, because I hope they do something together again, because I really liked how this played out. It's first 2 issues in. Is this 6-issue one, I believe?
Yes, 6 issue.
Cool, because I want more.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's, you talk about just artwork, and just a couple quick things that I absolutely loved were, as always, I'm always a huge fan of the facial expressions. And that's one of the things I love about Freddie with his artwork, where it really gives you that raw emotion. And there's a couple times when He-Man gets mad, and you see the anger, you see the etching, and you see that, oh yeah, someone's about to get hurt here. And some of these broad 2-page spreads where you've got half a dozen villains attacking him, because that's how they're attacking. They're attacking in packs, because that's the best way to take down someone like He-Man. You need to hit him with that numbers, and I love just how these are laid out. And it's one of those things where you're sitting there looking at Lockjaw, Beastmaster, Cyclone, whatever, the Crow guy, I can't remember. You got the mutants from the Thundercats universe, and it's one of the, I'm sitting there going, yeah, I feel all these cool villains, and the nasty look that you have from them. Then you go into He-Man, with just that determined, that etching on his face that is just like, oh yeah, it's time, it's go time. You sit there and I'm a kid again, just geeking out over what I'm seeing story wise, but also visually wise. This is that kid in me, this is the kind of stuff I wanted to see, but they never really gave us that edge in the cartoon, because it was written for little kids. It wasn't written for adults who have a child complex going on. It was written for kids, and they did the stories for kids, and they kept it very PG and friendly. And this is more of an adult thrill factor going on. It's still not crazy psycho vertigo that you can't put in the hands of little children, but it's something that an adult could pick up and go, man, this looks cool.
Yeah, that part is really neat for me. I didn't realize you were so versed in the lore of both properties. I really, don't get me wrong, I liked both properties. And when I say casual fan, that doesn't mean like I watched one or two, but it was very broken for me. So it's not the same as a fan who saw most or all of the season. Everything I saw, I liked. Actually, Thundercats, I jumped on later and watched like pockets of reruns because I really like it. Both of these properties are really right up my alley, but I'm not going to pretend that I am, the diehard fan who saw everything. I wish, reading this, I wish I did. And actually, I want this. It's funny how you can read something like this and want more of the properties. I want to go back and see some of those. In particular, I'm more versed in He-Man, so I actually want to see more Thundercats from this, just because this has gotten me motivated.
Yeah, and I tell you, Mum-Ra in this series they did really good with him, because Mum-Ra is the villain for the Thundercats universe, and he's physically has a lot of weaknesses where he has to keep going back to his tomb, but just the sheer power that he has. And I love the fact that in the issues, they explain that, yeah, you look at him, you think he's physically not that powerful, but this is one of the ultimate forces of evil in the universe. And I love how they made sure you realize that, and how, he keeps getting taken down by the Thundercats, but part of it is some physical limitations, but just the sheer power and the sheer darkness that he is. I love that they kept that, they really gave that a good solid, and as I said, they really beefed up the villains. They gave us some, the villains have more of an edge to them that is something that was really missing in the cartoon, which again, as I said before, is written for little kids. So they couldn't really do that. So I'm very happy with their interpretation of him, as well as just the other supporting cast.
That's the funny part. We talk about cartoons being written for little kids. I get the all ages label. I think back to my childhood, though. Saturday mornings was, and I know, we're talking about this. These were after school animated features, but it was the same thing as for the Saturday morning cartoons. My stepfather used to watch every Saturday morning cartoons with us. We'd get up in the morning, we'd watch them, flip between 3, 5, and 8. Those were our local NBC, ABC, CBS affiliates, and we'd watch the whole, jump between various cartoons and watch our favorites all the way through. He was there every Saturday morning with us. And I don't think he did that. I think there was an element of it. Sure, he was doing it to hang out with us, but he was having a good old time, during the whole thing too. So I think a lot of times there's been this diminishing of all ages to mean fluff, as opposed to there being just some great properties. And some of those that aired that were reruns were prime time programs when they originally aired. You look at things like Flintstones and stuff like that. That was the Simpsons of its day.
Yeah.
I mean, that stuff is great. I mean, so it's really cool to see these properties kind of come back in this fashion. I'm glad we got to talk about this one as an initial piece. I'm going to reach out to Freddie, and hopefully there's room in his schedule to come on the show. Obviously, comic creators nowadays, with all of the conventions that are on there, their schedules get booked up really fast, and obviously their priority is making sure their work gets done. I would want that to be their priority, but I would love to have him on the show to talk about this piece, because I've got so many questions about how this was created, because it's so cool. Fun week of reading.
Stop him! Stop him! Even if it means your lives.
Jim, our first book that we're going to discuss in this episode is going to be Flash number 11. And obviously we're going to talk casually about the previous issues. We were talking about how to do creative team because of the fact that these books often have shifts on creative teams. And there's going to be elements of the story before issue number 11 that we're going to talk about. But issue number 11 is the Speed of Darkness Part 2. Joshua Williamson is the writer. David, Gianfelice on art. Ivan Placencia on colors, Steve Wan's letterer, Carmine Di Giandomenico on the cover, Dave Johnson variant cover, Amadeo Torraturo and Diego Lopez, assistant editors, Brian Cunningham, editor. Apologies for name butchery. The Flash is one of my favorite titles right now, and I'm a big Flash junkie. There was a time where I had to cut back my budget, and I can only get 2 books a month, and I was getting Flash and Starman. It was the only time that I wasn't reading Batman. I didn't have any break in my run because, when I had money again, I was going back and getting back issues of Batman. This was during a time where actually I would take comic runs and go to the comic shop and sell them to buy books because I didn't have the budget to speak of. And so I was reading, Flash and Starman pretty heavily during that time, but I didn't have a lot of disposable income for comics. And I had enough of a collection that I could use my collection to pay for new books. Because to me, reading the story became the more important thing. I gave up some pretty good books in this process, though.
Yeah.
But honestly, to me, it is always the continued reading of them. That's been my trump piece. Much more, I love having a big collection. Don't get me wrong. To me, being able to go back and read full runs of classic stories is great. But the continued new reading for me is really important. And Flash is one of those titles that when I got the Flash bug with Wade's run, I just couldn't put it down. This book has that same feel for me. I want to talk about the What issue, when they were talking about that Flash Two Worlds issue, where it was Wally and Wally, the two Wallies. There was a piece of that where, Jay Garrick's helmet and the two of them not, Barry saying, I saw a vision, and it made me feel hope, and it was Jay Garrick's helmet, and him not knowing what that means. This world is connected to the previous world. I don't care what anybody says. And we're seeing those elements there. Wally West is from the previous world. Superman is from the previous world. I don't think that's a throwaway either. I think Superman is meant to be our Superman here. I think we're going to find that out as the storyline continues. These are just things. Now, keep in mind, these are things I'm throwing out as my being objective and thinking about, what's going on in the current stories right now. I could be wrong on any of this. I don't care. I like speculating. I love throwing this out and just kind of thinking through these stories. I'm happy with them teasing this enough that I'm speculating beyond what's going on the page. I could be completely wrong about all of it. I'm fine. They could take a swerve and tell the story in a whole different way. That helmet, seeing the Jay Garrick helmet and the fact that Barry has a connection to it, that doesn't mean I don't think that everything's going to shift back to the way it was in the old universe. But I think we're going to see that there's a lot more of a connection than we're even realizing in the puppet masters that are playing here. Because I think what happened in Detective Comics with Tim Drake is not a throwaway. And I think this as far as he's putting things back together that were separated, I think that line was pretty critical. And I think we're going to see it play off with this. But man, whatever they're doing with this, I don't care. Even if they head in a new direction, the fact that Barry had that feeling from that helmet just is a geek out moment for me. I really love that. This book is a real positive book. And I love that it's not beholden to the TV series. I like that it's doing some things that they do on the TV series. Cool, yay, and all that. But I love that they're just really crafting a really strong Flash comic book that takes into the fact Team Flash, the Flash history, Wally coming in for a guest visit, the new Wally. I really like this kid. And I like that they have found a way to make two Wally Wests in a way, okay, that's storytelling and story-driven. Barry being the ultimate good guy, but being human is a pretty critical key for me, because it's not about being perfect. It's about trying to do the right thing, even when you're not perfect. You know, it's how do you remedy this? How do you be honest? How do you have those real discussions? Barry, I really feel like Barry has turned into this guy, which was very different when he was first reintroduced. He's this guy you can hang with now. And that's when he was reintroduced, there wasn't quite, for me, that connection to him that I have now. This is what I loved about Wally West in his run. The fact that you felt like you could hang with him. And I feel I can hang with Barry. And I'm having a lot of fun with this book because of it.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. And here's the thing. It's interesting because when we talked about Supergirl, we said how they pulled a lot from the TV show in there. And I was happy with it because, you know, they were doing some cool stuff. They weren't 100% locked in. For me, this Flash is doing more of, to me, it feels like it's more of the TV show is pulling stuff from the comic. It feels like this is its own separate universe. It feels like this is its own separate entity, and I like that. And I'm not knocking them pulling from. I'm not knocking them bringing in characters, but for me, this feels like an organic movement, an organic flow from what we had in the other Flashes to this now. It's not like there was a sudden shift and a change or anything dramatic. It's as the story has changed, as the characters have been introduced, it's being told within the confines of the story. And I think that for me is something I'm really digging, that it's always going forward. The Flash is always moving forward. He is that hope. He is that optimism. I loved the discussions when he was taking down Godspell about heroes not killing, how it never entered his mind. You know, not even for a second did he think about killing Zoom, even though Zoom killed his mother. I love the fact that even when he's fighting Godspell, and Godspell was hurting, he's like, hey, man, are you okay? He's actually trying to help the guy and not just pound on him, not even beat on him. And even Godspell made a note about how, yeah, we're in the middle of a fight. You're ever the good guy, Barry. You're making sure I'm okay. You know, kind of throwing it back in Barry's face. I thought those was just some great moments that, you know, as I'm, you know, especially these last couple issues where we had the end of the Godspell story and then the beginning of the Darkness story that we got right now, that you keep seeing that Barry Allen keep running, keep going forward, do what, you know, always find a way to save the day. And I think that is something that has really just always been something cool about my love and new appreciation of the Flash. And that's a characteristic that's in the TV show, but for me, it feels like it's originated right here in the comic. Right here, original source material is what created this Barry Allen. And I think that for me is something, it's a different vibe that I have this as opposed to maybe like the Supergirl cartoon where they're, you know, the Supergirl title and TV show, which have a lot of similarities. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of cool how they mesh the two together. This is Barry Allen. This is the Flash. This is who he is. I think that for me is something that this rebirth really did, where I didn't lose anything. I gained from this story. And I gained, you know, a lot in just an understanding and appreciation of who Barry is. And I'm getting this awesome supporting cast. Completely agree with you on the Wallies. Love how they've got both Wallies in continuity. Both Wallies are kicking butt, and each one has their own groove, but you can tell, yes, that is Wally West. Yes, that is somebody who is going to be the Flash.
Yeah, and I know where you're going with this. I don't feel like the comic is reacting to the show or the show's reacting to the comic, other than the sense that they're both pulling from interesting source material. So I do think, you know, the comic writers, if, you know, obviously they're watching the show, probably if they see something cool, obviously Wally West is one of those great elements that I think has the comics benefited from, the new Wally West, bringing him in. I like that the new Wally West being brought in isn't getting rid of the old Wally West. They're embracing the comic history. I like that Barry and Iris in the comics are different Barry and Iris than they're on the television show. Thematically, as far as the kind of people they are, that's there. But I like that the show is not afraid to chart its own path and feels very Flash. The comic feels very Flash. They are not beholden to each other. I know what you're getting. There's a different vibe, and it right. works. It works really well, and I love both equally because of it. This is just a great time to be a fan of this stuff. The Barry and Iris relationship is particularly interesting because she doesn't know. And that's the difference in the comic book right now. I don't care if she eventually finds out. I've actually really loved stories where she does. But right now, I like that she doesn't know. I like that it causes some awkward situations for Barry where he has to do the vanishing act. I'm going to go get the police, in those sequences where then Iris is naturally peeved. And from a guy standpoint, that's like the worst move you can make. Like, I'm not I try not to be a sexist guy at all. I'm not. But I do think there's a certain chivalry piece that I do believe in. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I would feel very bad if I ran away from a situation where I left a female standing there in danger and went to go get the police, so to speak, without saying to her, go, do it, to do the chivalry piece. And there's not a sexist thing. That it really is chivalry. And I do think there's a difference between the two concepts. Which we could probably have a whole different conversation about. And Barry being that quality of person, I think that's why it matters so much to bring it up in this piece. Barry's that kind of guy. Barry's a stand-up guy, not a stand-back guy. So for him to have to do that and to have to put that impression out would have to drive him nuts. And I love the fact that I think Barry's my friend and Barry would be that guy. I like that we know that about him, and there's certain innate character qualities to him that are important to him, and it makes this book fun.
And I 100% agree with you on the Iris-Barry relationship and where it currently is. And I like that. I like this groove that they've got going right now, because they're friends, and is there maybe a possibility of something more? Of course there is. You can see it already building, but as every time something maybe would happen, things kind of shift. Like right now, Barry is this good friend of Iris who's helping her, her nephew through some issues and yada, yada, just all that. But the whole time, he's the Flash. The whole time. And I love how they're doing that with, just their friendship. And the stuff you mentioned with him taking off and having to run away to protect his secret identity has been, one of those things that has me chuckling. But I loved it when a couple issues ago when Paper Cut was attacking them in the park.
Yes.
And Barry's like, he wanted to protect his secret identity, but I love the fact that he's like, hey, if I need to, I will blow the secret identity to protect innocent lives. And he was at that point in time ready to simply just do the Flash thing. And that's when Wally showed up. And that's when, kind of it was able to change and shift some stuff around and take advantage of the distraction. And I loved how that played out, especially the times when Iris goes to visit the Flash, with Barry in tow, and he's able, okay, here you go. And he's back to being Barry. And they're able to do the switch change and stuff. Those are some really cool usage of just the dual identity. And the fact that Wally is mad that he doesn't know Barry's secret identity, but the other Wally knows it. And that, for me, was a great moment between the two of them. When original Wally meets new Wally out of costume. He's like, hey, you know who I am, right? Well, of course, the red hair gives you away. Okay. And the two Wallys have a conversation outside of the costume. And it's the Kid Flash to Kid Flash, Wally West to Wally West. He's the person who would understand what Wally's going through. And I especially like how new Wally keeps bringing up the fact that, hey, he wants me to trust him, but he doesn't trust me. And that, for me, is a really cool moment. And, again, looking forward to the big reveal, because I'm thinking Wally is going to find out before Iris does who the Flash is. And I think that is going to be another element of the keeping the secret identity, especially if Wally has to keep it from his aunt, as to who the Flash is.
I like that Iris knows about Wally, and that's something, you mentioned the relationship with the aunt. I think that is something that this book is about. It's about relationships. And there's not one relationship. It's not just Barry with each individual person. We get to see some character development of the relationships between Barry and Wally, Barry and Iris, Iris and Wally, Iris and Barry, and so many other characters in this book. I love the fact that the quote-unquote uncle is added another layer to this story now, where that could be Wally's dad. And Wally realizing that, having been adopted myself, I don't know who my birth parents were. I have no urge to know. And that's I don't mean that as like a bitter thing or anything like that. I'm 45 at this point. My parents adopted me when I was a baby. They're my parents, and I'm very happy and comfortable that I know who I am. I'm happy with that. The only thing I would ever say to my actual birth parents would be, thank you for making the choice that you did, because I'm still here because of it. So I'm, thrilled with that particular piece, obviously. But I don't have this urge to know that. It was funny how I connected with what Wally went through in finding that revelation out. I think that's part of the reason why I don't want to know. You know what I mean? It's kind of, I know who I am. I'm comfortable with my identity. My father once asked me, he said, because my brother did find out. That was a big change for him. My father asked me, do you want to? And I said, no. I said, I know who I am. I'm happy, with all of that. And it's genuine. For Wally, when he hit that moment, I was like, wow, this is why I don't know. That's exactly what it is. I know who I am. I'm very comfortable with my identity, who I am. You can naturally start to question yourself when there is another piece that's brought into that particular puzzle. Because I honestly feel my life is put together right now. And I mean, I think that's one of the pieces where, when I say put together, I mean, I hit the awkward phase, right? Your 20s are kind of where you go through your awkward phase. You knew me in my 20s. I was trying to figure out like who I was, what I wanted to do. My motivation was low because I didn't know that. I didn't have that path charted for myself. So during that era, I might have had a very different answer to all of this, just because, you're trying to figure things out and put them all together. But during that time, I figured out my career path. I got going in a career path. I met my wife. My relationship with my parents, because I started to know who I was, got much stronger. My brother, my brother and I used to fight like cats and dogs. My brother's one of my closest friends right now. It's life changes and things like that. And solidifies. I've since lost both of my parents, but, things were in a really strong, good place with that. So I don't have this question mark as far as this hole I need to fill in my life. It's interesting in Wally's age, in the comic, I'm really connecting with this in a very different way, where I'm like, wow, that betrayal of knowing that there was two people who knew. I think I would be upset if my parents knew and they didn't tell me. Yet I don't want to know. So it's a double-edged sword. It's one of those things where I get the betrayal piece, because you don't want to feel like you were the one left out of a secret about you. But yet the secret in and of itself has a profound effect on you emotionally. And your own questions about, does this change who I am? Does it change how people view me? That's what Wally's going through right now. I love the real nature of that little segment being something so pivotal that you're like, man, this just added a whole other layer to this kid that I really like. I also like that they reference that Barry knows about his time in Teen Titans, and how are you doing this? How are you going to school? I know you're sneaking out and doing these things, trying to chart for this kid. Listen, you have to balance your superhero life with your responsibilities of being a good student and all that type of thing. I like that they're really addressing teen heroes and how hard it would be. School's a full-time thing. How do you be full-time Kid Flash and be a student with all of the obligations that go along with being a student that aren't just during school hours? I like that this comic's addressing that stuff. I think it's way cool. It adds a real nature to all of this that I think we all can connect with. This is some really terrific writing, because these are characters that really matter to me because of how much they're touching on real life issues in a way that is, in a certain sense, quick and subtle, but has major impact on adding layers to, I think, what's already been great storytelling. This is a great run.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's funny because you talk about, just how the same thing with you. I love that scene when, Barry lets him know, hey, I know you're doing this. And he's like, hey, how'd you know that? Like, you're not the first Flash I've trained. And, but the fact that Barry is really being a mentor to Wally, we're really seeing him go into training Kid Flash. And that's something that's, Batman, of course, trained Robin. Batman, did everything he did for all his Robins, all the people who were on the team. You see that physical hand, but the Bruce's training and Bruce's teaching of his Robins are so dramatically different than Barry's handling of his Flashes. The way Barry is more of that true mentor to the kids, and he's really being there along the way. No, because especially I loved when Wally wanted to learn how to go faster. It's like, no. You don't learn faster. You got to learn the science of the Speed Force. You got to understand the whatnot behind, the what is the Speed Force, not just go faster, go harder. Because that's exactly how Flash beat Godspeed. Godspeed was physically faster than the Flash was, but because Barry knew, everything about the Speed Force, because Barry had his knowledge, he was able to take him down. I love seeing Barry, make sure that Wally knows that.
That part is one of the things for this book that I'm loving too, because Barry's really trying to teach Wally in two different levels. He's trying to teach Wally as Barry Allen, and he's trying to teach Wally as the Flash, and he's being called upon about the fact that the Flash, he's looking at him and saying, you won't even trust me with your identity. You know mine. Why don't I know yours? That would be very tough as a partner in this type of world to at some point in time go, the Flash is my hero, but now we're partners. And you want to lecture to me about responsibility and all this kind of stuff, but yet you don't trust me with real responsibility, like knowing who you are. I love that. I mean, that's a really cool conversation between the two. This Wally, who at first, I'm going to be honest with you, when they were introducing Wally West, I'm like, oh, cool, they're doing this as like kind of a throwaway nod to the television show. I am completely in a different place with this, because this kid is just being so fleshed out in such a different way because of the fact that we're dealing with a Barry who's clearly older. They're not contemporaries of each other. I like that that's different than the television show. This is a younger Wally to an older Barry. Barry's the, guy who's successful in his career, and he's got, that all together. He is the true mentor in this case, whereas our Barry on the television show is closer in age to Wally. They're more like older brother, younger brother than adult teenager. And there's a different relationship factor there. I like that because I think that it does add a different layer to what you were talking about earlier to the comic that works for me. This really does feel very different than the television show because of that. And that, I do agree with you, it's a different sort of twist on this. I like that it goes back to what I think we've said since Rebirth, and it's something that I think is a strength behind this. None of these books are cookie cutter. I think they've really taken a look at the concepts that make each of these characters, and that's where I think Rebirth, why there's so much excitement for me with it. I feel like The Flash is a book where it totally feels pivotal and integrated into the universe, but I don't get the same vibe as when I'm reading Superman. We're going to talk about Superman, and I think we need to talk about Superman next. We're going to talk about that, and that's another book about relationships that I think is doing it very well, but feels so different to this book. And I love that because I get excited to read both of those books for the same reasons, the great character development and relationships, but I get a very different vibe from the creative teams, and it's just embraced because the world of these characters is so much different than the world that's in Superman. And I think that's something that DC's really needed to embrace. And I think they tried to do it with some of their experiments during the New 52, but I think what they've learned is, why are we doing this in our experiments? Why aren't we just doing it in our core books? And I think we're getting that now, where we're getting this really cutting edge storytelling that gets to the core of these characters. Really, I don't want to say plays with the concepts. It does, but it also, they take and embrace what always made these concepts work and modernizes them in a way that just feels so organic and cool. It feels very today and contemporary. I mean, I'm gushing about this book, about how this feels so connected to real life experience. That part is what I really dig, and I think that's important with a comic. It's important with a television show. Those are the ones that you latch onto and go, they better continue it another season. You know what I mean? Because the characters matter. It's the same thing with this book. You better not cancel it. It's that relationship and that connection to them. Numbers matter to me now in comics, not because of the fact that I don't really care about them. I read the books that I want to read. I just hate seeing a book, and I'm not saying The Flash is, don't get me wrong. I hate seeing any book that I'm enjoying to this level having low numbers. And I don't mean that about The Flash. I was thinking about comic numbers quite recently, and I was like, do they matter to me at all? And they really don't, except in the sense that I hate seeing a quality book. It's one of the reasons why we do this show. It's get the word out about books that you're digging. Let people know why you love them. It's okay to complain about things that you don't like. I'm not anti that. Sometimes I might come across that way on the show. I'm really not. But I've always been a big believer in give at least equal service to shouting out some books that you're digging, because you got to help these books that are really good quality books. Not lie about them. Tell people why they're quality books, why they're quality reads, so that way they stick around. This is an example of a book. If the quality continues on this, I want this to keep going and going and going and going. This is a creative team I'll follow now. Williamson's delivering, I think, just an amazing story here. The art's sharp. I think the art shifts between this book has not bothered me at all. I really like the art teams that they're using on this book. This has been one of my favorites because of everything that we're saying here.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's funny because you talk about art, and I'm glad you made a quick mention of them, because the two different art teams they have going on are very dramatically different for me. But as you said, it's not anything like I can say, oh, this is better than that one. They're both good, and they're both quality work. And it's because we have this, bi-monthly situation going, they can't just have one team work on the book. And that is something that it's a weird adjustment for me. And it's something that, I am enjoying because, as I said, it looks good. But every so often, and this is one of the titles that I really noticed it. But again, I just did a binge read where, I just did the last, 4 or 5 issues right in a row, and you really see it that way. A couple other titles where, I'm doing them one at a time, and it's not like boom, 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 rapid fire. You can kind of get the groove, and it's less jarring for me. So I think, with, I don't know, I'm kind of babbling here a little bit, but the main thing I want to focus on is saying that, the look can be different, but it's still going to have that same effect because we're still getting that same quality story. When I look at this, Wally looks physically different between the two different books, but it's still the same Wally. I still get that same groove from him. Barry looks different, but that's still Barry. That's still the Flash. And I think that is something that they're doing really well with these different creative teams. And part of it is because obviously same writer, but part of it is we're getting more, to me, feels like we're getting more team effort between these different creative teams. And I think that is something that I'm really seeing, and I'm seeing in all, and not just Flash, but multiple titles that have these, where it's multiple creative teams every other month.
I have an interesting mindset right now because, we've seen recently creators leaving books over creative differences. It's not a lot, but you see some that are having those issues. I don't know where those are coming from. I don't know if those are writer-artist, editor. A lot of times you hear that's editor, creative team. I don't know where that's coming from. I think what needs to happen in those cases, if somebody's having a bad experience, I always want great creators to land on their feet and wind up on a project that they're enjoying. It's always tough because these aren't creator-owned projects. You're dealing with characters that belong to a shared universe. So you're going to have, I don't want to say shackling because it makes it sound heavier than it is. I think when you go into this that you have certain parameters and rules that you have to abide by. And I think what I always admire is when you've got great creators that get on books like these characters, that they find creative ways to take those rules, embrace them, and do something unique and something different and take us somewhere where these characters have not gone before while maintaining those rules that we need as readers because we want to feel that these books are connected to a history for these characters and also a future for these characters. So there's an understanding as far as that's what you're getting into. I think those are sometimes when you've got a writer or an artist or an editor and certain creative teams that don't agree. That can become a very rough relationship. And I don't always get so discouraged when I see them leave. I always feel bad when there's like this bashing from people that seems to go on the internet without knowing the full story. And I always appreciate creators that exit things gracefully, even if they've had a bad experience, because I think that's very hard to do. To be able to look and go, I just had a really bad work experience here, but this is my career. I have to kind of exit this professionally, especially when it's talent that I like. I like to see them land somewhere else. I tend to go out of my way to follow where they go because I want to see them land on that cool project with a better experience. And then I want to see whoever their replacement is be somebody that it just meshes, and they gel with where things are going, and it just winds up being a win-win. I'm big on the win-win because these are talented people that you want to see wind up having a good experience because that relationship with us then becomes important because I want that relationship of, wow, this is somebody who is working through an experience to try and deliver something entertaining to me that I get to enjoy and read and escape from the stresses of my own life. We all have them, and that's part of why, why are we comic fans? This is our getaway and our escape. And a book like this, really, I love that I connect so deeply with it on a personal level, to the point where I'm sharing through this conversation, unplanned a lot of this, my own life, because I connected so deeply with this book. That's because of the creative talent that's delivering the story. They're delivering something very personal on these pages that I think is cool. In the rules, they're playing in a sandbox, and they're still doing that and delivering something neat, which I think is cool. It's interesting. Like, you started off on this with not being the Barry fan. You came into this because you were a Bart fan, and that was your Flash. And it's interesting to see now. Is Barry your Flash now?
Yes, Barry is now my Flash, big time. And I'll always have a special place for Bart, and I always wish they'd bring him back in some way. But Barry Allen as the Flash is awesome. I really dig this character. I dig this personality. Just, again, as I kept saying, he's always keeps going forward. There's always got to find a way, and it's, seeing him as a mentor, seeing him as the hero. It's, the hope personified. And it really did start, my love for Barry Allen really did start with the Blackest Night series. And I still, to this day, will quote as one of my favorite lines from that old Blackest Night series is when Barry runs into the police station. You tell him the Justice League is on this. And I love just the fact that Barry, in the middle of that darkest moment, is like still inspiring hope to the point where he was given a blue ring. And for me, that was the birth of my, man, Barry Allen's a cool guy. I got to find out more. And the more I read, the more I get to understand him, the more I see him in other universes and other play on him. And just this character, who isn't just a speedster. It's not just about running really fast. It's about this person who has, he's got that heroic dun-da-da mindset, and he doesn't have the invulnerability of Superman, but he does have, the usage. And it's not just runs really fast. He understands the science, the physics, all the little, tricks of the trade, all the flash facts that he can pull from. He's able to throw it at you. And I love that's what I'm really digging about this character, really digging about the Flash. And it's, the more I get into this guy, the more I'm like, man, the Flash is awesome.
He is, and that's part of the cool part. Actually, you said hope, and it triggered me right away. I got to talk about this two-part storyline in The Shade, because I'm a huge Starman fan, and I thought what James Robinson and the whole team did with Starman, The Shade, the redemption of The Shade, but still making this totally captured everything I love about The Shade. The Shade has this darkness inside him, these shadow creatures inside him. And because of that, he's this guy who, in the concept of the Starman comic was, he was this villain who got to this point of maturity where he cared about his city of Opal. Never apologized for being that villain, but because of that, kind of evolved and became this character where he became an ally to Starman to save Opal City. And through that, started having his own code. And was a gentleman, and to a certain extent, but this gentleman who had this very dark past and could go to these very dark places and often had to pay for mistakes of the past because of it. This embraces all that. Hope Adair, I love that it embraced the most recent Shade miniseries, but also it echoed the Starman concept rather than trying to reboot all of that. I thought it was really smart. I thought that was a great miniseries. I give them a ton of credit for bringing that into this. I was, in a weird way, I was afraid this was going to be a Shade reboot. Because I'm like, I like that story so much. I adore this writer. Because found a very cool way to make Shade an imposing foil in this. An imposing villain in this, while embracing all that at the same time. He added another layer to this whole thing that I thought made it so interesting when they were inside the shadows meeting with the Shade, and it's his own, we've all been at stages in our life where we've been unsure of ourselves, and I think that's something you constantly go through and battle and learn to move beyond. And I loved that humanity of the Shade through this. I thought this was a great use of the character in those moments, and also continuing further the education of Wally And Barry, really trying to be there for him. They're finding out what happens to Iris and Hope, that they're now, because they've been corrupted by this place, the big bads inside there, I think is great. I really love how this story is going. I'm rooting for the Shade and Hope to somehow make it through this as a couple. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but man, is this just a very cool story that I feel continues on a relationship and a story that I want to read. I want to read about Shade and Hope. I want to see where they happen. This is just a great job of how to bring in this character. He could have rebooted the Shade. It would have been easier to do. I love that he didn't. I give him credit that he did. I don't know where that came from. I don't know how much of that's editorial behind the scenes. He made it work in a way that is incredibly satisfying. So kudos to whoever was involved in making this work, because it plays out so well in this story. I can't wait for the next issue because of that. Taking so many elements of things that I love and making them work in a comic that it makes me want to see more Starman.
Yeah. Well, I'm not as large, my knowledge and database on the Shade and the Adaires and all that is very limited, because it's, I don't have that, the background that you have in it. But it was one of those things with the limited knowledge I had, because when they first started introducing the shadows and the shadow monsters, my first thought was Gentleman Ghost. That's what I thought this was. I didn't know it was Shade until issue 11 when Flash calls him Shade. I'm like, oh, a dummy! It's the Shade, not Gentleman Ghost. So that was kind of a neat realization. Then when they pull in Hope Adair, I'm like, oh yeah, they had something with her. But they did a great job of showing that relationship, of showing his past. And if you don't have a large knowledge on it or zero knowledge, you still have a good groove as to where this is going and who she is compared to him. You have an understanding of who he is, and it's again great storytelling in that they pulled in the past, they gave us a backstory, but they didn't take so long that it takes you out of the flow of the current story. I think that is something that can get very difficult to do when you're, basically filling in the masses who may not know who these characters are. So this was, again, wonderful balance on advancing the current story, giving us the backstory, but not, derailing or slowing down the process. Yeah,
that part totally works for me. This is just a great book. It's a great read. It's one that I'm enjoying every month because of it. And I think from this, we're talking about relationships. I want to talk about Superman now, because I feel that that's also a book that is so steeped in relationships. And I think there's kind of an organic jump from that then into Batman, our final book this episode. So you want to talk Superman?
Yes. And our next session is on Superman number 11. The stories by Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason, with pencils by Patrick Gleason. The inks by Mick Gray, Mark Morales, and Christian Alamy, Alamy. Colors by John Kalis, with letters Rob Lay, Gleason and Alejandro Sanchez on cover, Andrew Robinson on variant cover, Andrew Marino is the assistant editor, and Eddie Berganza is group editor, and of course, Superman was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster by special arrangements with the Jerry Siegel family.
This is one of those books. First of all, I'm thrilled. Peter Tomasi is going to be doing, and I think it's just him, I don't know if it's both, is going to be doing the writing on Super Sons, the upcoming series when it comes out.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of like, yeah. So this is basically the Zero issue, right?
Yeah.
I am loving this book because it's a spiritual successor to their run on Batman and Robin and the work that was done on Robin, Son of Batman. I love that part of this. There's things about that book. We used to talk about the movie night issue, right, of Batman and Robin. And it's one of my favorite issues to this day, and it stands out. This book is so reminiscent of that. I love that there's something about this team. There's a magic that they create on the books that they're on. And it makes them one of my favorite creative teams. This is right now my favorite Superman book. I'm just loving everything about this book. It's further proof, you and I have always talked on the show. You talked about how you wanted certain evolutions of characters and you wanted to see them have progression. I don't think you can do this across the line. It works with Superman. Oh my gosh, Superman's got a kid. He's married. It's working. And it's some of the most exciting Superman storytelling I've read in years. I got to jump back a bit and talk about that dinosaur issue where they, through some mishap in the fortress, wound up in traveling through time to seeing dinosaurs. It was something so out of Superman's past, where we're going back, to the 50s and 60s, and just those wacky storylines you would get there. And it worked so well as being a great story with Krypto and Superman and Superboy. And I was just like, my gosh, was this just a fun ride? It's just a great story to be told there. And then the two of them being afraid to get back to present day, and they tied it into the losers. I'm like, oh my gosh, they are just embracing everything cool about the wackiness of DC and having so much fun with it. And it was fun and exciting, and Superman having a good time. And there was a real sense of danger in the whole thing, and adventure. Adventure is a big part of what I'm loving about this book. There's a lot of adventure here. So I know we're going to be talking about this crossover between Damian and Superboy and Batman and Superman, but I don't want to throw away not talking about that particular storyline because, man, was it cool, and I love Krypto.
Oh, God, yeah. Well, that story had the great Krypto story, but I really did love seeing Clark and his son.
Yes.
And they're up at the fortress, and he's helping him with his science project. And it was just, again, a really cool father-son moment. And that's something that I'm very happy with how Clark has really started with his embracing his son as Superboy, especially the need that the kid has to work through his powers, to understand who he is and everything that's going on. It was awesome how he was in the dark initially, and now they're pulling him into it, and to the point where he's interacting with Damian Wayne. He's having his own adventures. He's going off and doing his own, within the Superman title, he's doing a lot of stuff. Within the Super Sons title, he's going to have a lot of adventures. But I do love the fact that you still see that father and his 10-year-old boy. And it is kind of interesting how Jonathan is younger than Damian. Not only just experience-wise, because Damian grew up in the League of Shadows, but Jonathan is a little kid still, and there's those moments. And when you talked about when they were on the island, how he was upset and he was scared that he's never going to see his mom again, and even Clark Kent is like, yeah, I got to remember that you still are a kid, you still are that, you're still my son, you're still this little boy. I'm still gonna, don't worry, I'm gonna be here for you. And I love those moments that you get to see him as a kid. You get to see those as he's punching a dinosaur or something. You still get to see those moments, and that was just a great series. And then just this story arc with the world's smallest. It's just, again, anything that has Damian, I'm hooping and hollering and I'm cheering. But Damian and Jonathan Kent, Robin and Superboy team up. I was absolutely loving this, especially because you got the two fathers watching them go through their groove, and again, the way Damian makes new friends is he kidnaps them. You gotta love that.
I love the Goliath. I was really afraid when Robin, Son of Batman ended that Goliath would no longer be a part of it. I love that Goliath and Nobody, they're embracing everything, and I'm so glad that all of that's continued. That's one thing I think that they've done really well with Rebirth. We talk about how much it connects with DC's past, but I think the other thing that they've done really well is keeping it connected with DC's present. I think that has been some of DC's best reboots historically, have done a great job, and reboots maybe an overused word, but I think, refreshing, rebranding, whatever you want to call it, it's worked the best when you haven't thrown away the toys, you've embraced the toys. and all of the toys, current, past, whatever, and brought them together. We talk about Infinite Crisis, right? I think it was one of those miniseries that had a pivotal role in recent years in doing something like that, and kind of connected everything together again, brought it all back into the sandbox. This is doing it again in Rebirth in a different way. And I think that's important too. You want this to feel fresh. There's a mystery here, and it's an overarching mystery. This family is at a pivotal juncture to that whole thing. They are a key to the whole thing because they shouldn't be here. And yet, is that true? Or were they supposed to be here all along? I want to know what's happened. I love that there's that hidden piece behind the scenes that we haven't seen play out yet. I don't need it to play out right now. You're giving me great stories right now. I love that it's not jumping to this big event. It's teasing and giving us great storytelling along the way and delivering a foundation. So I really, when they're ready to do this, I'm going to care on a level that is insane because I'm so invested in these characters from these great stories right now. Damien is, I think, being played so well because you know at his gut, especially when you see Batman and Superman in trouble in this, he's a good kid. He has this brash exterior, but at his core, you need to show those moments every so often. It's something Tomasi and Gleason have done throughout the years so well. They know when to drop the outside and show us the inside of this character because it takes him from being the little brat to being this, oh, wow, he's really a victim of how he was raised. His relationship with Batman is really letting him round himself out to the point where he's becoming this unique and interesting character. You don't want to drop that, but you need to show us the side where we like him, too. And those moments, oh, man. That's what makes him everybody's favorite little monster.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. And that is such a great description of him. Yeah, my favorite little monster, because he is absolutely that. But there is the hero in him. There is the good. And one of the scenes I loved in this was the fact that, this whole issue is, basically a test between the two dads have on the kids, get them to work together, in each one of these different stages. And Damien gets through the first stage basically by cheating. But, hey, ask me if I care, is his mindset. And I love the fact that he goes through, catches, nobody off guard, takes his emblem and takes the map for part 2. And he's moving on. And it's that Damien saying, you know what? I don't need this kid. I don't need this amateur. I am, Damian Wayne. I am Robin. And I always love that confidence he has. But when the time comes and he needs to use somebody else or has somebody work as a team, he does, and he does well. And that's the thing. You got to have that nice balance and that nice edge to it. But also on the other side of it, you have Jonathan, who always has that nice, friendly farm boy kid attitude. But there's those times when, okay, it's gut check time, and he's got to knuckle up. And you see him develop the edge when he needs to. You see him, fight out and lash out when he needs to. I love just how each of the two characters are so similar, but they're kind of like shifted and twisted on the axis, just like their fathers are similar, but slightly shifted on the axis. It's a great usage of making these characters fit their family, but also still letting them personalize who they are.
Yeah, that part's really important. You're right, the personalization of who they are, because that's what works with this book, right? It's all of those pieces. It does what I loved. I go back to Uncanny X-Men, right? I grew up loving the baseball game and those pieces. To me, it's just as interesting to see them in interesting battles as to see them kind of tooling around together, where it's Kent and Wayne, and which gradually shifts to Clark and Bruce. I want them eventually to find out they were the same two friends they always were all along. I want us to eventually find out this is that Bruce. I don't know why it's so important to me now, but if it's not, I don't care. I'm glad they're building a new relationship with these two. This is working. I love how Tomasi and Gleason are doing it, but I do hope eventually that connecting thread is there on some level, just because this relationship that's being built here is becoming so important to me. This is how you do Batman and Superman team-ups. This is why people were so cool over the years with World's Finest. Why was that such a popular book? People wanted to see stuff like this. This is going back to DC's roots and doing it in such a way that I think this book every bit matches what I love about some of the best TV series nowadays. Every issue is like every episode of those high-quality shows where no time's wasted. They have those great moments, those interpersonal connected moments. They have the high action. They have the sense of adventure and wonder, and they take you places that you didn't expect to go and keep you guessing. And I love that about this book. This is on my short list as one of my favorite books that I'm reading right now. And it is, without a doubt, this is my favorite Superman book because of the fact that I really just love this creative team. I don't hear Tomasi's name and Gleason. I shouldn't, when I say that, I should not diminish Patrick Gleason at all because it really is a partnership here between them. You hear a lot of teams touted. I never hear them mentioned in those same light. I don't get it. Like, how can you read the run of Batman and Robin all the way through and not be giving them the same props? You know, this team's up there with, you know, your Jeff Johnses, your Scott Snyders, things like that. I really feel that way. So I just, it's something that's very strange to me that you don't hear them mentioned in the same light. And that's not taking anything away from the others I've mentioned. It really isn't. I'm really saying we as fans need to push that just because they're that good. I'm glad to see that they're being put on a flagship title like this because it makes this a must-watch book for me. And Superman should be a must-watch title. And they've made it that for me. And that's not taking anything away from the Action Comics team, by the way. I'm loving that book, but this just happens to be, out of the two, if I had to, you can say, which Superman book are you digging more? This one has a slight edge over that because of the quality. And the quality of that's high. So the bar's raised really high on Superman reading for me.
You know, it's funny. It's interesting because you've done it multiple times throughout this episode. And I know I always do it. But normally I don't catch you doing it. You keep saying watch. And the way the character was played, you know, and it's like, you know, yeah. And I agree with you how it does have it has a physical feel.
Yes.
This isn't just paper. You know, this isn't just a two-dimensional. This does have a real feel. And you get that same energy I get from when I watch a TV show. So I completely agree with you. But I'm laughing because I'm normally the guy who does it and not you, man.
Yeah, well, you know what it is? It's funny. The books we're talking about this episode feel very cinematic to me.
Yeah.
I don't think we deliberately linked these books. But I'm going to say that. We're talking about, we're obviously going to talk about we just talked about The Flash. We're talking about Superman now. We're going to talk about Batman next. These are titles right now that feel very cinematic to me in very different ways. I really feel like the writers and the art teams are crafting film. And I'm not diminishing or taking it away from being comic art. I feel like your best storytellers have a way of taking something that has no motion and making it feel like it has motion. They trick you in the best and kindest ways into believing there is things going on in between those lines of panels that aren't really there. Yeah. And I feel these books do it through dialogue, through great art. It's been something in Rebirth that I've just found so interesting in these titles, just how engrossed I am in them. I have stockpiles of books right now. I mentioned some digital titles in Speeding Bullets that I was like, I'm going to read some digital titles because I haven't in a while. I haven't been able to. And I was really enjoying that experience. I've got a stockpile there of all kinds of digital stuff because I keep getting the weekly releases because I just like the format. But my stockpile's huge. I love it because, you know, we talked about it with the television shows. When the quality's this high, it's fun to read like 3 or 4 issues of these things, get caught up. Because you get behind 2 months on Superman, you're 4 issues behind. I mean, I like that, though, because it's great reading. And sometimes it's better to read these stories. Because I was 4 issues behind on Superman, and that's no statement on the quality of it. It's more of I was keeping up on things we were doing for the podcast, which is the thing with podcasting. You sometimes have to be judicious and say, okay, what is our next topic? Well, that has to take a priority on something else I may want to read or watch or do at that moment because we want to keep the show going forward. It's interesting with books like this. I'll go back and go, okay, this is one of my favorite titles. I want to sit down and read this. It's one of the reasons why we chose it. And I loved reading. I read 4 issues of this to prepare for this episode and loved every minute of that delivery because I felt like it was binge watching.
Yes.
And I think that's why I'm going there because you're right in catching me on that. And I do feel like I binge watched Superman. And I loved every minute.
I completely agree with you. You know, I'm right along with you, you know, with just how, you know, when I'm reading this, I'm hearing the action music. I'm hearing the adventure. I'm hearing the da 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 as, you know, Damien's jumping on the motorcycle. He's got Jonathan with him. They're racing down, you know, with Goliath, you know, playing nice friendly game of tag, and they're trying to catch the train and just everything that's going on. I'm right along with you where I'm hearing the voices. I'm hearing the music. I'm seeing it. I'm right along with them just hooping and hollering. This is, you know, again, great story, artwork, physical portrayal on everything is really it's pulling you from the page, and you're seeing extra stuff that are coming out. And again, art read through on these issues were again an absolute joy, especially when you get to the initial opening train sequence where, Damien jumps on there, see you later, suckers, and he's going down, and Jonathan's trying to catch the train, and you just see that going through. But then when he opens up the map and it just says tag, bam! Absolutely was cheering with Goliath's appearance, and then just Goliath, doing Goliath stuff. I'm so happy, like you. I'm glad he's still around. Glad he still has that same personality and that same character that is Goliath. Where I'm still trying to completely understand how much of Goliath is animal, how much of it is intelligent being. It's kind of like that whole Crypto story, where how much of Crypto is a dog with superpowers, but is he something beyond that? And I like that. I love getting those moments where you have the stories where there's something more to Goliath than just, being this big bat cat type creature thing with wings and whatnot. There's more to him. And it's same thing with Crypto. When you get great Crypto stories, there's more to Crypto than just being a dog. And I love seeing these interactions, but also it was the coolest thing because you got Damien and Jonathan on one page riding in that motorcycle, and you had to really look through the art sequences, and you see the crates that are being thrown at them have the motorcycles in them, and that's where he picked it up from. And I thought that for me was a really cool story element, especially considering the fact that like one of the boxes is Wayne, it's part of the Wayne Tech family, so it's Bruce Wayne's it's a Bruce Wayne train, and just later on when you realize this whole thing is really just one giant test after another. Of course they're going to give them their transport inside the test, see if they work together as a team, see if they utilize what the resources they're given. Do they improvise, adapt, overcome? How do they act as a team? And I thought that was a great story element that second and third read throughs, when you start putting more of this together, you're like, oh, that's kind of cool.
One of the things I really liked about this was the sense of danger. These are two characters that they're not going to kill either of these characters, right? But sometimes writers have a way, and art teams, they have a way of suspending disbelief. And I also want to Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason, Green Lantern Corps. I keep referencing Batman and Robin in this book. This is a team that's had a lot of longevity together, both separately. They've done great projects. Together, they've done great projects. And it's just cool to see them together. So I do want to throw that in. But there were certain sequences where you see Batman say, "I got to pull him out there." No, wait. Same thing with Superman. Got to pull him out. No, wait. Go on that end. Because they had nobody in Goliath. Goliath isn't being very friendly at these moments in those sequences. There's sequences with nobody. One of the things I like about Superboy is Superboy has Superman-like powers, but they're constantly growing. There's a DNA thing going on with him where, because of the human side with the Kryptonian side, we're seeing certain powers manifest themselves in different ways. I'm finding this kid, I'm a big Connor Kent fan, right? I loved that Superboy. I'm finding this Superboy equally, if not more, I don't want to say more interesting. I'm going to say equally interesting, because I really loved the Connor Kent's whole story, how it all came out with him being a clone and all that piece. This is why I'm finding this one equally interesting is I don't feel like they're doing that story again. They're doing something new and fresh. This is Lois Lane's DNA and Clark's together that have made this character. And because of that, there's a different sort of thing happening with this guy. The powers are manifesting in a unique way that's different than cloning. And I like that. I like that it's a fresh story. I like that he's a nice kid and that he's immediately likable. And the reason why I like that he's immediately likable is he's an interesting contrast to Damien, who wasn't, but is now. And I like that there's like an opposite journey, but in the same way, they feel like the same kind of interesting connection that you have when you see Batman and Superman together, right? They're, in some ways, that's a friendship that shouldn't work. This is a friendship that shouldn't work. And I, like, when Super Sons was announced and they said the characters are going to be, I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool. Now I'm on a very different level with it. I'm like, not only was I excited about it before, this has made me go, I'm all in. Like, when can this book come out? Can it be out tomorrow? And I want to read more of these two together. I want that to be monthly because it's so. I think it's a monthly book. I don't know what the release schedule is. I don't care. I just want it.
Oh God, yeah, and it's funny because you say how Jonathan was immediately likable and Damien wasn't, and I love Damien now, but even now I'll still say he's not likable, and that's just the personality. But it so works for the little monster that it's one of those things where I'm like, I wouldn't want to see him overly friendly with somebody new. I like how he has this where he puts off that airs where it's talking to Pennyworth. It's not Alfred, it's Pennyworth, but Damien respects Alfred. Damien, will listen to Alfred when Alfred tells him you can do that yourself, but there's still that air to him. And I like how we get that from these two guys, but it's also, the couple of the moments, especially like when, we're talking about just how their parents are testing the kids, see how they react. But the entire time it is a controlled environment. Throughout this whole process, it's always been one or both parents watching out, making sure everything's okay, making sure they're safe, making the call to pull the plug. Part of me does wonder, do the kids ever figure this out? Do they ever realize that, like the tornado, the hurricane that's, that they run into, that's actually Clark flying around in circles, right?
Yes.
Or it's his super breath or something. That's
it's his breath that's creating it.
Yeah.
It might be a combination of the two. We do see him using his breath at some point. I shouldn't say that I remember him. I'm looking at it. I don't know that I see him flying around in circles. But Who's the thing with Superman? It's probably a combination of a lot of things that cause that, but it's definitely his breath.
Yeah. So, and it's kind of neat just how, again, that's part of the story I'm thinking off page is, do they realize it now? Will they ever realize it? Will it ever be addressed between the two of them? Or, that's part of the story that I want to see these two together. I want to see these two interactions, and not just in danger. I want to see their personal interactions. I want to see Damian and John hanging out and doing something together. I think that would be an absolute hysterical issue where even if they don't have any superhero type stuff going on, where it's just them two personally interacting in some way, shape, or form. I think that for me will be something kind of neat.
Yeah, that is the part that's kind of neat for me. I actually loved the way that John was the one that helped with saving Goliath. Like the train's going over the edge, and the two of them are working together to escape. And this is one of many times that they were looking at potentially pulling the plug. It was Alfred actually was looking to pull the plug on this one. And I love that the two of them work together, and John's like, we got to save Goliath. And I like that even though they won't admit it, there's a bonding over their relationship with pets. Yeah. And I'm a pet owner. I've loved pets my whole life. I like, that's something that people do connect with. And I've seen it at my work where my superintendent's a farmer, right? And he's connected with my systems tech engineer who works underneath me. They connected over the fact that both of them have a farm, their animals, and talking about that piece. And it turned a relationship where it was very tentative at first into a relationship where there's respect. And I think, there's certain connecting threads. When you find that connection between people, that connection becomes a starting point towards a relationship. And I love that this issue was filled with, both of these issues were filled with what you could see as building blocks, like, oh, these two might actually become friends at some point. I want to see the journey. I like that part of this. This is part of the fun. It's no fun if in two issues you sum it up like, we're buddies now. That doesn't work in this type of thing. You see that gradually develop over time. That's the part that's fun. So then when the friendship really does become a thing, it's really important to you because you're invested in it by how much time you put into seeing it organically develop. And with these two characters, it would make no sense.
Oh, God, yeah. It's again, the out-of-costume interaction does have me cracking up, especially, at the end when they're cutting down the Christmas trees, and the one for the Kent house, the one for Wayne, I think they had one of the Wayne towers or whatnot. Yeah, and I love the two kids, again, just they get done with this great moment. They have this thing where they're both, they earn their capes back again, and you have that really cool standing, there where they're standing tall and proud. And then later on, once again, little bickering between the two of them, start starts it all over again over something as simple as the fact that Jonathan is much taller than Damian, and I love how he keeps taking that little jab. You know, again, it's a brother thing. You know, you and your brother picked on each other. Me and mine, we went at it constantly. There is that little jab that two brothers are gonna have, especially at this age, especially with these kids. You know, and especially giving the attitude that Damian has towards everybody. If I was, you know, a good half a head taller, I'd be throwing it in his face as well, just to say, because you know it bugs Damian. You know it's giving him. So let me just a couple more jabs here.
I'm a big fan of the new Superman outfit. And the reason why I'm reminiscing about that is, you know, I see this sequence where these boys really put you through the spin cycle, didn't they, Goliath? And you see Superman's, you know, flying over there. You kind of see how it's, you know, got that modern look to it, but so much of the classic is there. I like that it embraces what really worked on the new one. I like that it's a cloth costume. I started geeking out over the Kryptonian armor story as well, but I'm going to be honest, when you see the fact that this guy doesn't need that, just kind of, I don't know, it's Superman to me.
Yeah.
But it's a wink and a nod to all of that, and I think that evolution really works in all of this, and it's a lot of fun. I'm looking at the battle right now where, you know, the two of them work together, and you see Alfred over the two. You are our super sons. And you see them back with their capes on, and I love that John's pants, because they're regular jeans, are ripped, but you see, you know, the more clean shirt and all that piece. I like that kind of mixture, because he's a kid. It's not, he isn't the seasoned veteran that has like the full costume or anything yet. It's kind of like how Damien's costume's more functional too, if that makes sense. You know, with the boots and the pads and the way that all works out. I like the mix. It's just an interesting sort of costume mix between these two. Great show of artwork. Heading into that Hamilton epilogue, which I know I referenced it earlier, but, you know, we got dad and son with matching hats and matching darkness between Damien and Bruce. I really like the distinct difference between the two. Hope on one side, you know, kind of a critical eye on the other. There's something really fun about the whole thing and how it played out. It shows that you can do humor in books like this without detracting. You know, one of my favorite shows I'm watching right now is Legends of Tomorrow. Did you see the Jonah Hex episode?
Not yet.
Okay. I'm not going to spoil anything with that, and I wasn't going to anyway. I just wanted to see. There's some humor in that, but it's not overdone. And that's pretty much the key for me. It didn't take away from any of the danger. It's actually very reminiscent of what I loved about this issue. Humor sprinkled in at the appropriate moments, danger sprinkled in, and real, you know, intrigue and character development is sprinkled in at the right moments, too. It's a very well-balanced episode that reminds me of what I like about this particular issue as well. This ends, you know, with the two of them bickering again and going at it in a way that I just found really, really fun and interesting. This is easily one of my favorite titles right now. Every issue is this good. I mean, yes. It's 11, you know, issues in, and every issue is this good. That's really important.
And it's tough for me to say, you know, in a way, it's tough for me to say, but I do have to agree with you, because the Superman titles, because Action Comics is wonderful, and I'm digging Action Comics, but the Superman titles have these great, you know, Clark and John interactions. And that, I got to tell you, that the super family is what, you know, kind of is out Superman for me right now. You know, and I think, you know, the Batman, and again, the Batman title is a tough call between Batman and Detective, because, you know, Batman's more Batman focused, Detective has more of the team dynamic, etc. So it's a different groove and a different vibe for it. But it is one of those weird things that Superman really is beating out Action Comics, and it's beating it because of this team dynamic, because of this family dynamic that we're really exploring, and we're really getting to some cool family stories from it.
Yeah, that part is the family dynamic piece is really strong for me. And that part's amazing. You know, the fact that you can take these comics and add this family dynamic. It's one of the reasons with progression and, you know, why should characters get married? Whether they stay married or not in comics is irrelevant. It's the storytelling that comes with it when it's appropriate. Superman marrying Lois Lane made sense. This progression now of him coming back and having a kid, that, they tried the whole thing, well, let's reboot him. Well, people want this. And it's interesting to see. And I loved the New 52 Superman. I'm not anti that character at all, so I'm not backpedaling on that. But when you bring this guy back and they did that Lois and Clark book, and it's one of the things I agree with you, first of all, on your sentiments about Action Comics. And we are going to do Action Comics on an upcoming episode, just because I want to talk about that book. And it's not diminishing the quality of that. It's applauding this book, not diminishing that book.
Right.
But it is funny when you take a look at the fact that it was looked at like Spider-Man can't be married, Superman can't be married. It so limits them. Now when you do stuff like this, you got to take a look at, well, where do you naturally progress the story from there? You do this, and now he's a dad, and that actually has added a lot of vulnerability to his life, because he has to be concerned about his family in a world where he's a fish out of the water. Just a really great way to move this forward and make me feel like I'm reading something different with a character who feels immediately familiar to me. Yeah. And I can, like Superman right now, I'm like, man, he's my buddy.
And it's even pulling him out of Smallville, and just, pulling Lois out of Metropolis. Lois Lane isn't in Metropolis anymore. Clark Kent, technically, Superman's not in Metropolis. There is a Clark Kent running around in Metropolis, but, they really, and again, that's a kind of a neat thing that they've done with this story that, we still have that Kansas farm boy, but he's not in Kansas anymore. And we still have that Superman, that Lois and Clark relationship that is awesome, but they're not the big city reporters, but they still are doing their thing. Lois Lane is still the great reporter that she is. She's just kind of shifting on how she's doing it. And just the introduction of Jonathan really gives how do you do like a vulnerable Superman story? How do you make him more realistic? How do you bring him down to people's levels? Well, you give him the kid. You show him teaching his son. You show him dealing with that interaction. I love how throughout these last two issues, Clark and Bruce were talking about with their own fathers and how their fathers raised them and what they learned, the lessons. And even at the end there, they have that moment where it's Bruce saying, our fathers would be proud of this, and it's kind of a cool, just these two, iconic people are now really connecting on more than just the heroic level. They're connecting on the personal level. And it is because of this family. It is because of these kids. And I don't want to say we're seeing a softer, kinder, gentler side of Batman, because we're not, because Bruce is still analyzing Jonathan. There's no way in any way, shape, or form Bruce is not just going through the stuff, and just breaking down, okay, if I need to take down this kid, how do I do it? Bruce is doing it. That's just who Bruce is. But you still have this connection. You still have this trust between the two of them. Because not only is Bruce trusting Clark, he's trusting Jonathan. Jonathan White now knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman. Or he knew all along, whenever he found out. But that's something huge, that Bruce is trusting this kid into his secret. He knows, the secret side of Batman. He knows, and that's something huge that he's doing. So it's, again, there's so many different stuff that when you stop and think about it, that you're really seeing some cool growth and development in both characters. And it's because of this family, because of their kids, because of the kids' interaction, because of their personal interaction.
Yeah. And here's the thing. They both have secrets on both sides. So the same secret that Bruce is giving up is the same one they have, because they're trying to hide from the world that they are from the previous world.
Yeah.
And that it's Superman, his wife, and kid. And those are things that they're trusting as well. So it's interesting to see that maybe these people understand their desperate need for these secrets more than anybody else, which I find that connectivity it's a common connectivity thread. It does require a lot of trust, because any one of them could blab and ruin it for everybody. Yeah. And I like it. I like that that's a thing, and it feels very much like it. Want to talk Batman now?
Yep. And our next discussion's on Batman number 11. The writer is Thomas King, with pencils by Mikel Janin, inks by Mikel Janin with Hugo Pietrus, colors by June Chung, letters Clayton Cowles, Mikel Janin on cover with Tim Sales and Rico Rienzi, Renzi on the variant covers. Rebecca Taylor's the associate editor. Mark Doyle is editor. And Batman was created by Bob Kane with Bill Finger.
It's funny leaving this one for last. I am having, like, as far as Batman books go, both Detective and Batman are so good. It's kind of like the same. We were almost apologizing to what we were doing to Action Comics because I feel the quality is so high there. I think I have the same problem with Batman and Detective Comics. They're both so good. Like, when we talk Action Comics, I know what's going to happen. We're going to be talking about how great that book is. It's almost like you're going to, because of the fact that it just is. This is something with Rebirth, and it's one of the reasons why I think the excitement's so high with it right now. You're delivering quality that where secondary titles, however you want to quote it. I mean, I'm sorry, and there's 3 Batman books, because you got to throw All-Star Batman in the mix, which kind of is its own category. You take a look at all these books right now, and the quality and the creative teams are so high, it's very hard to pick your favorite from time to time. I don't know that I really care about that. It's like putting my favorite reads right now in a list is not something I really have any urge or desire to do. I like that there's so many of them that I would have a lot of problem with it. I don't feel this overwhelming need right now to choose a number one book. Just because so many of them right now are my number one read. And I think that's the kind of the secret rebirth for me right now is I've got so many number one reads. This is one. I'm a Batman junkie. Tom King having a chance to go hog wild in the Batman verse, really knowing how to key in on not only what the fans want, but what they don't know that they want. Like, he's doing things here and playing around with things here that I'm like, if you ask me on paper, should he do this? Should he move this character? Should he team up these characters? Like, this whole I Am Suicide thing with Batman's own Suicide Squad, I don't know that I would have picked this team or done what he's done with a lot of them. He's done a lot of twists and turns. His handling of Catwoman's outstanding.
You know what? I gotta say 100% yes. One of the thing I love that he's doing, and he did this with Dick Grayson's story, it's less inner dialogue. Especially this issue where with Catwoman, we really don't know what she's thinking. Only thing we're getting is what's physically on the page. We're not getting the inner dialogue. We're not getting that, behind the scenes. It's only what's physically out there, what we physically see and what we would be able to physically hear if we're standing there. And that, for me, is one of the cool things when he does that, because Tom King likes to do that in a lot of the books he touches. And it's not something that's overdone or anything. He picks the time. It's the sniper picking his shot. When is the ideal time to do it? Bam, he drops it. And this issue, especially given the ending betrayal, or is it a betrayal? Oh, I don't know. But given the ending, if we knew what she was actually thinking, if we knew what was going through her head, could dramatically change the read. So the fact that we don't know, even we don't know what Batman's going through or what ventriloquist is dealing with. We don't know their inner thoughts. By not knowing that, for me, that accentuates the story, and that's something I really love when it's done and done well.
The whole bit with Batman jumping off the ledge, they show in the past. And he's doing the flip. It's going all the way down to the floor, and you just see that motion there. This is something that, is it Mikel Janin or Janin, or I don't know. I'm butchering the name. I'm sure of it. This artwork was so great in the Grayson series. I like that it just is been changed and modified for Batman. We see a different color tone palette being used here. It embraces the Gotham atmosphere and world in a way that is so satisfying. This is like poetry. I mean, I'm just watching that whole flow through sequence. Cat, please, it's enough. I want that as a poster. I really just want to see that as a poster. I love the new outfit, with the yellow outline around the bat when you see it when he lands right down there. Everything about that for me is everything that I love about Batman. As a kid growing up in the 70s, Batman had a lot of this, the acrobatics, the sense that he honed his body as a tool. And I love that that's been modernized for today. And it just really fits in this sequence. I'm really glad that this team got a chance to work on Grayson and do what they did so well in Grayson first, and then come over here. We've got Tim Seeley doing the great Nightwing book right now, and you've got Tom King over here, and both of them kind of like upping their game from where they were before, which is like hard, which is crazy to say because of how good Grayson was. I just love that. I think this is something where you just feel like there's this sense of energy that is happening, I think, with Rebirth because of books like this. The artwork in this is pretty key for me, along with the great dialogue. This is a team. You mentioned team earlier, and I think that's something in common with all of these books. Even though we have shifting art teams, it's wow. That's something that this book has had all the way through. Because I really enjoy both art teams working on this title. I think that it's really kicked up something. I like that they're having a chance to work on arcs. And I think that that's something that's really working well for me, because I think as a writer, I'd be curious to see if Tom King's crafting his stories based on knowing who the art team is. As far as the way that they deliver storytelling, I'd be curious to see how that process works, because it's really working well. This is a flagship title.
Yeah, and it's funny with one storyline. Writing wise, I absolutely love it, but visually, this has been such a cool thing. And you gotta shout out the colorist on this one, because they did something that I'm racking my brain to seeing if I remember people doing this before. But it's a night chase scene, and you can see the shadows, and you can see that, but it's the yellow background. And that for me was a really cool way to accentuate the characters, but it's they kind of flip the script on you with the color palette. A bright yellow background wouldn't be something I would think of Gotham nighttime. And even like the hue on the one on the building that they're showing, it still has that yellow tint to it. But the way it played out, it was just such an awesome sequence that I was like, man, that's cool. That's something that you sit there, especially that 2-page spread when Bruce finally catches her, and they have that cool dialogue. I shouted, I didn't hear you because you were running away, because you were chasing me. You killed 237 people, Cat. I had to chase you. I killed 237 people, Bat. I had to run. I love just that banter dialogue, but also just the visual play out that they did with this. I was like, man, this is a really cool visual and story wise being told. And I was just like, wow, I love this. This is the page I want to be the poster. This is the page I would love to just sit there and stare at, periodically.
It's funny, when I look through this book, so much of this could be a great poster. There is a sequence later on where there's this. I'm looking at this page where they're climbing along pipes.
Yeah,
it's so amazing how it's used as its own boxes. It's its own panels. Yes. And I just love that creative use of paneling in all of this. There's so much.
With her and ventriloquist.
Yes, I mean they're climbing through these pipes, and you just see like I'm kind of following them as they climb. The story's climbing through with us. And I just loved that. I thought that was really clever. I want that to be a poster. It's funny. I want that to be a poster with the dialogue.
Yes. Oh,
because not taking away from the art, I just think I love the way you read that. It's just so different.
Oh, I'm in agreement with you. You know how it's like at the cons and whatnot, they'll sell pages, and you'll see that kind of stuff. This is one of those pages I would actually I would seek out to see if I can get my hands on. This is something that I would like to frame this and put this up on the wall, because as you said, it just the way it played out, it looks so. This looks really cool with just this whole pipe networking, and you got to follow the story, and you're following the images, and it's going through the different ways, and you're just like, man, this looks awesome.
That part is, it's really one of the things that I loved about this story is you shift from, when you do a team, and you shift from one sequence of events to the other, like the use of Bronze Tiger and Punch and Julie, and just embracing the strange world that Batman comes in. Bronze Tiger being a part of this, I thought was really great. His recruitment straight through to this sequence. I loved the recruiting sequence when it led to that kind of cool, like, high five moment between the two of them, and he became a part of the team. it's a band of misfits that you expect somebody to turn. Now okay, let's go here because we danced around this. You know, you mentioned it at the end. So Catwoman appears to turn, and you could argue with her rough path on this one. She's on death row, is how she's looking at it, right? She's looking at potential for lethal injection. So do you think she's really turning on Bruce? Because I could see this being going either way.
See, it's funny because on one hand, I was thinking no, but the one scene that makes me think that she is actually turning on Bruce is when Bruce is in the overhead watching this played out. He says no, and it's like Bronze Tiger's like no, and he sees the betrayal. Bruce also says no, and even like it's part of me wonders, but being Bruce is Bruce, did he plan for this? Because this may not have been part of the plan, but Bruce, he's got a plan for it. He thought of this as a possibility. He's probably got, in one way, shape, or form with any of them, he knows what to do if one of them, double crosses him.
That part I agree with you on. See, I could see this all being one big swerve, but I could see it being very genuine where Batman now has to adapt to it. I get why she would do it if she would. And it's funny, it doesn't diminish Catwoman at all. You're looking at death row. You're looking at a way out. She knows that, like, Batman's going to put her back after this is all over. He's acting like this is going to be considered quote unquote good behavior. But is that really how it's going to go? I don't know. I mean, that part is really interesting. This story feels very genuine because of it. Yes, Bat, I'm right where you put me. And her kind of dialogue as it gets closer and closer to that sequence makes me believe this could be very genuine because he's the one that put her in jail.
And, with the last issue, we saw why she killed those people. And it was funny because, again, it's, a terrorist group destroyed an orphanage. So not only did she, all those innocent children, the people who worked there all died. So she's like, I'm going to teach these people a lesson. And she hunted down anyone associated with that terrorist group and took them out. It wasn't about the Bat justice. This was pure vengeance. This was pure, I'm going to kill them. And again, that was a really cool part of the last issue because we find out what she did to get put on death row through a note that she had written to Batman. So as he's going through the recruitment process, the note is being read kind of in the background, and it's bits and pieces, and you see just the length of it. There's a big difference between getting some time off for good behavior or being on death row. And I think that for me was a great thing where they showed why she did it. So it doesn't take away anything from her. She's not, she still is Catwoman. You didn't lose anything on that. But there's definitely a very realism that Bat's not going to be able to get her off death row. Even though she helps him with this, there's, he's not, and he can't, let her go because that's not the Bat either. But again, as you talk about it, as you think about it, this could be Bruce's way of getting her to quote unquote escape. But I can't see Batman doing that. I can't. That's one of the hard things. He's got that hard line that you can't cross, and she definitely not only crossed it, but she jumped over that thing and she crossed that bridge and then she burnt it to the ground because that's a serious body count. Granted, it was all evil bad guys, but it's still, you don't cross that line. And I love how the fact that it played out and how this is now with the double cross, we really don't know what's going to happen here. And it even like when she first reveals the double cross, she guts, not guts, she slices the Julie's throat there. Pretty massive. You see some massive blood loss there. So I'm like, what's going on here? And that's something that really hits you at the end.
It's funny, and with the New 52 launch, one thing that really didn't change much was Catwoman's outfit. Yeah. It's that same outfit that was in the previous universe. I'm glad. I really liked the functionality of that outfit and how it all worked. It's obviously very reminiscent of more modern Catwoman usage in movies and things like that as well. But there's something about that comic style of that outfit that I really like because it does, we always talk about outfits that are functional. And that one, it's weird to talk about Catwoman's outfit as functional because she's dressed like a cat. But I do think there's something where it looks like more she'd be able to hide in the shadows and be the whole cat burglar thing. That there's that part of it is interesting to me, that it does work on that level versus some of her outfits have been more purple over the years. And there's something about black for hiding in the shadows that seems to make a lot more sense to me. And I always liked the purple outfit, so it's funny to be saying that. I've actually got a poster of the Jim Ballant Catwoman, and I always liked his take on the character. But this, to me, is a lot more functional.
Well, yeah, and it's it's a classic traditional Catwoman style costume that we're all used to, and I think again, it's I dig the look, and with her, she's like with the Bat. Anytime they've done little tweaks and modifications to it, I never had an issue with her because depending on the case, depending on the job, you need something else. Maybe you need this extra feature in there. Maybe you need this little doodad or whatnot, tied into it. So like with Batman, sometimes the costume has to change depending on the situation. It's Batman always being one step ahead of his enemy. Same thing with Catwoman. She has that same style to it, especially, it's not just a smash and grab. She is the cat burglar who breaks in and goes into those places that, you can't imagine anyone sneaking into. She's able to do it because she's that good. That was something that I was like, I really dig that. And I like how throughout this whole rebirth, throughout everything, we've never lost that style to her. We've never lost that feel to her. And that's why I love the fact they explained why she went on that killing spree, why she killed so many people. Because to be honest, I never would have thought of her as someone who would have that high of a body count, because when you're a thief, when you're a cat burglar, you don't need to kill. If you're good, you're able to walk in and then walk out and they never knew you were there. That's part of how good she is. She doesn't need to do any physical violence. Mm-hmm. So when they gave us that great explanation, and actually the explanation 100% fits her personality. So again, really cool story, really cool laying down the foundation for who she is. And I want to see how this goes beyond this, because that's going to be a huge thing that's going to keep coming back and back and back to haunt her.
I agree with you. It is very different for Catwoman as a character to be in that role. I think it upped the game for it, but you can understand why. And that's something that's interesting on her, because she is in a darker world that separates her from Bruce. It's funny, on Gotham, on the TV show, when they explore the relationship between Bruce and a very young Selina Kyle, you kind of get that sense of the fact that these are two people who really care for each other, but are always going to be from very different worlds, no matter how much they try to understand the other. And I really like how that plays out on television, and you see it in the comics, and you're like, oh, wow. Great example of how it seems Batman in all media seems to be starting to get it right. And I really like that in what's going on there. It's kind of cool because we've got more shows on the horizon, like that Krypton show's coming up, and I don't know too much about that. I keep forgetting about that, but I hope that kind of does what Gotham is doing, in the sense of laying the foundation of some of because there's a lot to explore there that could be really fun on television.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm very nervous about that. Just because there's so little that's known about it, and who's going to be crafting this, who's going to be creating this. Because when the Gotham story came out, there's so much about Gotham that's already known. They've got a lot of lore that they can pull from. So it's not like they're completely starting from scratch, from ground zero. With Krypton, they really, there's been stories. Yes, there has been stories, and they've told it. But as a general rule, as a general knowledge of the public, people don't really know what Kryptonian life is like. Whereas people have an understanding of Gotham life. And I'm not talking people like you and me. I'm talking just the everyday, person who maybe has watched who's seen a comic book movie, who maybe would sit down and watch a comic book TV show. That's the thing that Gotham did, and they did so well that non-comic book readers can sit down and watch the show and enjoy the show.
I'm going to disagree, and let me explain why. I think they know that Batman's from Gotham, and they know what it's like when Batman's running around Gotham. But both my father and my brother watched Gotham, And here was the difference. I can't tell you how many times I got the question, is that true? Is that really Batman's background? Is that, and they were talking about the mobsters like Carmine Falcone and all that, especially the first season, and Fish Mooney and different things like that. They were adding things into the show that didn't exist. Harvey Bullock was a question that came up. Those aren't generally known to the public, other than Batman's connected with Gotham. Superman's from Krypton is what people know, but as far as there not being lore, that's not true. There's a lot of lore. And I think that the general public does not know that lore. What's going to be interesting to see is how much of it's going to be, it's kind of where your concern's coming from, and this is where I do agree with you. How much are they going to pull from the lore to use it as a skeleton? And then what new are they going to put in there to make it interesting? Because you can now flesh out characters that wouldn't have appeared before in a way that you can. Remember, Gotham's taken a number of liberties, like Leslie Tompkins and the Jim Gordon relationship. Where they went with Barbara and Jim Gordon. A lot of this stuff they've taken big liberties with. And I think that's what is working really well for that show. It's knowing when to take liberties and when to pull from lore. I think Krypton, the world of Krypton, to be successful, is going to have to know when to take liberties and when to pull from lore. It's a very interesting and tricky balance. So I think you can give the same concerns to World of Krypton that you would give to Gotham in order to make it a show in its own right. It's going to be interesting with it being on Sci-Fi. And, is it going to get the right audience? Is it going to get the right casual audience? Because Gotham has a nice casual audience. And those are the people that don't know any of that lore. Don't, have the history. Maybe they saw the Batman movies, in the theater. Which, if you take a look at the Batman movies, there's not a whole lot of that that's going to help you with what's going on in Gotham as far as the TV show. So if your only exposure to Batman has been movies and TV in the past, it's not going to help you. I think the same thing's going to happen with Superman. If your exposure to Superman's been movies and TV, I don't think that's going to help you with World of Krypton. So it has to be a really well-crafted, accessible show, the way that Gotham is. I do agree with you on the concerns. I don't think, though, that there is this overwhelming knowledge bank about Gotham at its core, more so than you would have with World of Krypton. Other than if you're going to and here's where I'll correct myself, if you're going on the fact that we're dealing with a different planet now. That part, I've got to agree with you to a certain extent. That's going to be different than... There's a general overview that Gotham's a dark place. I don't know that we have as much of an overview of Krypton, other than the fact that... we've seen it in movies as Superman blasting off from it.
Right. And that's one of the things I'm really talking about. Because our understanding of Gotham is it's an American city, and we kind of know, and people will think, the everyday John Q. public will think, New York City, and just those images that, a lot of us who aren't from the city who have no idea what it's like to live there. We have this dark, bleak opinion of what is New York. I remember as a kid thinking that people just walked down the street and were just constantly being mugged left and right, because I had no idea what was going on in the city. I had no idea what it was like to live in a big city like that. So in the TV universe, the general public already has kind of an image in their mind of what it's like to live in a big city, so they can tweak with that. But this notion of living on an alien planet, what's the alien planet going to be like? What's the culture? What's the different personality and the various, behavior that is? You think about it, like one of the Superman lores has the different, houses, with the Science Guild, the Labor Guild, and all the different, main, focuses, where it was very locked in and very tight with, if you were Science Guild, you were Science Guild. You didn't deviate over into the military guild, or you didn't, if you were the Labor Guild, you were the Labor Guild. If you were the medical guild, you were medical, and that was who you were. That was your how you grew up. Are they going to stick with that? Are they going to tweak it? Are they going to change it? Are they going to make it more like American society? And it's, that's the kind of stuff that I'm wondering, and I'm curious, and I'm worried about. And that's, because that could be something they could very easily anger and annoy people. If they make it just like America in space, well, guess what? That will annoy people. But if they make it so different from America that the general everyday population won't watch the show and won't appreciate the show.
Yeah, it's interesting on that one. Here's the thing with it being on Sci-Fi, you have to cater to Sci-Fi's viewership, which obviously World of Krypton would certainly do that by its nature. How do you pick up a casual audience with that as well? I think with what's going on with these other shows, you have to make sure you're advertising it. That's going to be interesting to see with that. Advertising budgets are so limited now, and television is so dense, in how many programs are out there right now. I guess my worry isn't quality on this one, only because of the fact that so far I haven't been burned lately. All the shows that are coming out I'm finding that are pretty good. The comic book shows, I can't think of one where I'm like, man, the quality stinks on that show. Yeah. So I'm not so much worried about that. I'm more of worried about it getting lost in the shuffle. And advertising's a big trick with that one nowadays. And I'm not sure how to overcome that, because it's the same argument we have with comic books, right? We wish they were advertised more because the quality's high. And how do you get that into new hands? World of Krypton, I think, is going to be an interesting one to see if they find a clever way to get that into new hands. I hope they do. It'd be nice for them to do like a Sci-Fi advertising package, because Sci-Fi is one of those channels that a lot of times I jump on their programs late because I'm not aware of them.
Right.
And a lot of it's word of mouth, where somebody will say to me, "Oh, man, I'm watching this show on Sci-Fi. It's so cool." I'm like, "Oh, great. It's on season 3. But back to binge watching. Those shows are usually really good for binge watching because they usually have a connected storytelling to them that it makes sense to go back to the beginning and just kind of make my way through it. It's how I originally watched Babylon 5. I jumped onto that show, I want to say, season 3. And I went back and managed to get... that was when people did videotape chains. You missed the show because there was no... You didn't have, like, the immediacy of DVD that you have now. So I did a little of that, but then TNT... ended up getting the whole thing. They bought the rights to it. You could watch all of it from the beginning, and it was on every night. So I remember taking my VCR out, and I was videotaping Babylon 5, every show from the beginning. And TNT was doing not only the continuing seasons of it, but they were doing special movies. So I got to finally watch Babylon 5 from the beginning, which that was a show you had to. I jumped on late and was able to kind of figure out what was going on, but I enjoyed it so much more when I went back to the beginning and started watching it. I might be off on what season I started watching it, but it was later in the show's run. It was whenever TNT got it. I started watching it right before then because somebody from work mentioned it to me. I started watching it. It was in danger of being canceled. Yeah. I'm like, I'm finally getting into this show. They've kind of clued me in on everything lore-wise that I need to know in order to understand it. Now you're telling me you're canceling this when it's in the middle of a big... Because it was a big story. Like, it wasn't one season had a story. The whole thing was one big overarching story. So I ended up jumping on that way. So I hope World of Krypton is one of those shows that, has the right word of mouth, the right connection to it. Because I think it's going to have... it could have that problem. I'd like to see it not get lost in the Sci-Fi shuffle, because Sci-Fi's putting out some quality product. I would like it. Maybe they do a package where they tout out a lot of their stuff, because I'd like to know more about what they've got on right now. So, because I do feel like I'm in the dark, because I have so many shows that I'm watching that I feel like I miss things that I would really enjoy.
And I watch so many shows now through the iTunes and or recording it. So I I fast forward through commercials. So I'm not seeing any of the advertisements for other shows. I miss a bunch of stuff. And it's one of the things I find sometimes I do is like TV show Z Nation. Yeah, I just finally got caught up with it. It's a zombie show, and it's more comedical, but it's still it's an okay zombie show. But I was up to like 10 episodes before of this last season before I finally started watching it. So I'm watching it and I'm seeing advertisements for movies that have come and gone from the movie theater. Like, oh, that would have been kind of neat. It's already gone. Oh, okay. Hey, what's that TV show they're announcing is coming soon? Well, now it's 8 weeks into it now. I'm like, oh, dang it. So there's a lot of weird. TV watching is different now, and so I'm very worried about World of Krypton. I don't know, and we got way off banter on World of Krypton when we're talking Batman.
Well, we were at the end. We were actually really at the end of the issue anyway. But I think it's kind of, you can't help but start looking at where do we go from here. And I think it's kind of fitting because we started talking about cinematics and just how cinematic this particular book is. Actually, going back to that, Catwoman playing up to Bane, because it's the last piece I really do want to talk about. Next, that's easy. You give me a plane, money, you help me disappear. In exchange, I tell you how you can finally break the bad. Now, here's the thing. That could be two ways. That could be her being so totally convincing that now she's on the inside, or it could be her really genuinely doing this. I can't wait to see where that goes. Because if I'm Bane, you can't help but still suspect her, but be buying into it.
Yeah.
Because the motivation makes sense. So on every level, it works. It's just a very interesting play that's happening here. I don't know. This, another great book. And
I know. Yeah, I want to believe her, but all the evidence is showing no, she's double-crossed him. And I think for me, that's the excitement of this issue.
I hope they can maintain this bi-weekly delivery. Because I don't mind the different art teams. I really like it, to be honest, because I'm liking the storytelling delivery. I like that every book handles it differently. I don't mind that some book, like you mentioned, we talked about Flash, where Flash we've seen, quote-unquote, what looks like fill-in issues compared to other titles just because of the way that they're keeping the storytelling going. It's working. Superman handles it in its own way. This handles it in its own way. Action Comics is doing its own thing. Wonder Woman, I like how the every other issue format. Green Arrow's doing its own thing. All these books are just kind of doing their own unique thing, and they're benefiting because of it. And I don't know, that part of Rebirth, instead of doing 4 random titles, I like that they said, well, why don't we take Batman and Detective and make them bi-weekly and really let the writers come back with some immediacy and really connect people to these books. I hope they're noticing success from this. That's one of the areas where, when it comes to numbers, I'm not very good. Because I don't follow them as closely as others do, I'm not always aware of how successful those numbers look like compared to what they have previously. I just hope the bottom line for DC is, because this is so good, I hope the bottom line for DC is showing this as successful, because I'm excited for the new titles that are on the horizon. I love all the titles I'm getting right now. I don't want any of them on the chopping block, because I think they're crafting a really cool universe here. One thing we haven't talked about, and I don't even know how this affects anything, was the buyout. Yeah. They're an AT&T company now? Is that right?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
So, and we haven't heard anything about that. I'm sure we're going to have to follow up on that in the future. I will admit I don't know a whole lot of the details behind that, but anytime that, forget about World of Krypton, that probably worries me more than anything else. Only because new parent company, is how much are they going to let these companies continue down the path that they have been? How much are they going to make changes to those? Because I think comics are heading in the right direction right now. Please let them continue.
It's kind of like when, Disney bought out Marvel.
Yes.
And everyone was worried, are they going to do? And Disney, from what I'm seeing, they did the right thing where they let the comic company deal with their comic, but then they actually beefed it up. For me, Disney buying out the Star Wars and having that go through really helped that franchise, because we're getting more movies inside that universe. So I'm happier, with that buyout. I'm hoping that, with DC, I'll be saying the same thing, where I'm happy that somebody else came in, because I'm still getting the great stuff I was enjoying, but I'm now getting more.
Rogue One looks super cool. The Marvel Star Wars comics are phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I will actually make a statement here. I loved the last episode, episode 7.
Yeah.
I honestly think from the trailers, Rogue One has the potential to surpass it for me. That's exciting. It's excited that this is like the side story film, but I think because it looks like such a different sort of Star Wars film, I'm excited for that and anticipating it. I mean, this is, for me, the geeky fan who, I went to the midnight showing the night before. I went back again the next day. And you know what was going on with me during that time. Yeah. So, that was my go-to movie, to feel good in a time of loss in my family. So I'm super excited. I'm looking at this one and going, "Oh my gosh, they're kicking it up a notch." And I'm a Star Wars junkie. I mean, that's one that I don't talk about enough on the show, but it's reignited a Star Wars fire, and I'm so glad to see it. And I'm glad to see it for a new generation because you need franchises like that, and I think Disney's doing a great job of, I think, marketing it while at the same time not diminishing it or spreading it too thin. This tells you how nutty I'm with it. I'm a big Disney fan in general. I was worried about their acquisition of it, though. I was afraid that they were going to go a different direction with it. Instead, they've done what they did with Marvel and embraced what makes it cool. Their Star Wars lands that they're looking at building, I've been watching the pre-production sketches of those. I am so excited to go run around in those places. They do. The last Star Wars movie made me feel like a kid again. And I honestly hope that this next one does the same thing for me in the sense of wonder from it. So I'm hoping that this AT&T buyout, they look to Disney, which is where you're going with this, and I could not agree with your sentiments more, and make that move versus a silly move. Because you could go two ways with this. I don't think there's a middle ground.
Yeah.
and I really want this to be the right way. Let's talk some voicemails.
I have him trapped. Peekaboo! Ow!
G'day Sean, g'day Jim, Brett from Australia here. Just wanted to phone and congratulate you on your 500th show. It's an incredible achievement. And the fact that you've done it over a number of years now, it's just amazing. It really is. And for someone who is still hesitant about jumping in feet first into podcasting, it's quite an inspiration to see that you guys are just doing it, every week or every couple of weeks for so long and just producing really, really awesome content and just doing it and doing such an amazing job at the same time. I've been listening now for quite a while, about 240, 250 I think I started. And it's interesting to think back that we were talking about, what's going to happen with the new Batgirl when Brian K. Miller took over. It turned out that it was Stephanie and how great that one was through to Flashpoint, and me being an idiot and talking about the old Flashpoint instead of the new Flashpoint. Through the new 52 and now the whole rebirth and everything as well. And I always enjoy your enthusiasm and your insight. You're both remarkable when it comes to analyzing what you enjoy about comics and being able to present that to people. And I think that's what I find most inspiring of all. And I think that's what I enjoy most of all. It's funny, I consider you guys my friends, despite the fact that we haven't really had a conversation as such. We'll talk on, you guys will talk on the podcast and then I'll send you a voicemail. And even though we haven't met or had a conversation as such, I do feel like you guys are my friends. We've been through a lot together. Thanks again for everything that you've provided in terms of the entertainment and the information and just the level of enthusiasm and joy that you bring to comics. You really love the comic medium, I can tell, and it just shines through from you both every episode. Yours is a podcast I listen to as soon as it comes out. I'm a bit of a Raging Bullets addict, I have to say. A Raging Bullaholic, you might call myself. I love your work, and I'm proud of you getting to 500, and hey, I'll be listening for another 500, guys, so keep it up, and thanks for everything you provide. It's really appreciated. Look, thanks again from this old comic geek. You keep me enthused and as engaged as what I was when I was first reading comics way back when I was a little kiddie. So thanks, guys, and all the best for the day and the occasion, and I'll be sending you more voicemail soon. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Jim. Bye, guys.
It's funny. He talks about how he feels like we're friends. It's funny when people call into the show regularly, I feel the same thing because we have these dialogues. I mean, granted, we listen to one and then we come back and that type of thing, but it is a lot of that. It is, there is an interchange there, and I totally agree with him on the connectivity of that piece. Before I actually go to some of his comments, the one thing he mentioned is that he was a little gun shy about starting a podcast. I can't encourage you enough to just grab a headset mic and start doing it. The great part about it is you can even take your first offering if you don't want to put it out there and delete it. It's so easy to sit down and record and do it, and it's such a great outlet creatively. It's for me, I did it because I wanted that outlet, and that was the start for me. And fortunately, I knew you'd be nutty enough to go along for the ride. And literally, it's funny. One of the things I would give you is the biggest tip, because it worked for us. Don't be afraid to modify your idea as you get comfortable. I walked into a podcast with an idea of doing a rotating cast, and it seemed like that was going to be the best way, because what I really was more concerned about was other people's time. I was concerned about finding a co-host that would want to do it with the frequency I would want to, and making sure that I had that. So I had an idea of, I'll just take a rotating cast of friends, because I didn't have a lot who liked comics, and bring them on, and, I can just keep rotating through, so I'm not really burdening anybody with this. You and I recorded the first time, and it just felt right.
Yeah.
And it completely changed my idea for the better. And I think as the show's gone on, and I would say there was a certain point in our episodes where you can hear it, where you and I started to really figure out what we wanted this to be. And that became the we thing. It started off as my idea, and there's a point where the show clicks, and I can't tell you exactly where it is. I think it's continued to evolve over time, but I think you and I both started to feel more comfortable with our own roles, with what we each bring to the table, and it just kind of became organic. And that part is where it starts to become fun. And this is therapeutic, and it's a break and getaway. I think when this show became our show is when it just started to have its thing. So that'd be my biggest tip is Peter Rios, I think for Comic Geek Speak, was the one who said this, and years ago. He said that about 10 episodes is when your show starts to really kind of flesh out and you know what it is. I think there's a point to that. I don't know if it's that exact number, but I think, his point's well met. You have to settle in and kind of be flexible early on and kind of feel things out and get rid of what's awkward and just start relaxing and having fun and letting the show be you. And here's the thing, you do a mini podcast every time you call into the show. And you feel, it is. I started by calling into shows, and at that time I was actually recording and sending in audio comments. And that is a podcast in and of itself. It's a mini podcast. So Brett, you're already doing it. When you call into the show, you're already doing a podcast when you do it. And it's one of the reasons why I like doing voicemails, because I feel like any of our callers become contributors to this podcast. And I've always liked that. We actually have had people do segments on our show before because they've wanted. Remember Brent Cassina, who's over on Comic Timing with Ian, actually started here doing BK's Bullets. And that fleshed into his need. He outgrew that and wanted to do his own podcast. And I think was better for our show. It was better for him because he got to do the more extensive things he wanted to do. Not that and please don't take that as me saying anything negative. It's just the opposite. I think it was fun to watch the growth from him calling in to that piece to then going on and becoming a accomplished podcaster in his own right. So I encourage you to do it just because I always find you interesting when you call in. So yay and kudos to you.
Yeah, and just it's funny because at work I'll talk to people about knowing people all over the world, and I'm like, I've got friends. I've got friends in Australia. I've got friends in New York. I've got friends, and the one guy I work with who he likes comic book movies. And he sees all of them, but he'll never read a comic book. Whenever I start talking about all the friends I've got, he always throws out, okay, have you ever physically met any of them? Like, no, I have not physically met them, but they're still my friends. And that's one of the neat things about this, environment, about what we do and just interactions we have. I've got a lot of friends out there that I've physically never met, or I've met once in my life, at a con somewhere. So it's, this is one of the things I love about doing this. About being there, and just I don't know, and the one bit of advice I always would give to anybody: don't be afraid to look like an idiot, because that for me was when I started feeling more comfortable on the show, was when I just threw out the notion, okay, I'm going to say something stupid. Let's just go with it and just be who you are and not be afraid to say the wrong thing. Now, my removing that filter has got me in trouble, so you got to be careful. But in the end, don't be afraid to just say what you're thinking and what's in your head, because you just throw it out there. And if it sounds stupid, well, then guess what? It sounds stupid, but you can back what you're saying because it's what you're thinking.
I think your advice is sound, though, because I think there comes a certain point where you stop being a podcast persona and you start being yourself. And I think that's the part. I think you and I hit a point where we just kind of clicked with that. I think our notes change. Like, we both prepare notes for every episode that we're doing, but I think our notes changed, and I think you can tell when you listen to older episodes, for people that have been crazy enough to go through and check out some of the older ones. You can tell there's a certain point where the notes are there to make sure we have talking points and that we don't miss things that we keyed on, but we don't read them verbatim. It's more, comfortable discussion, and we're not afraid to open up and be ourselves and share that with you. I think that was the thing for me, just kind of being glad to be me, not feeling like I had to say certain things to be more balanced. Here's the thing. If I'm critical of something, I'll say it. And if it's genuine, I'll throw it on the podcast because it's genuine. I don't feel the need, though, to be anything less than a fanboy. Right. Because that's who I am. This is how I comics. And I think early on, we used to get criticisms for being too positive. And it's just kind of like, well, but that's who I am. It really is how I view, if I did a video game podcast, just for an example, this would be the format. Because I know myself, I know what I like. I would be talking about the games that I'm really enjoying and spending a lot of time playing. That doesn't mean that I love every single one. It's just I'm not going to go, hey, I played this game for a half an hour. It wasn't for me, and here's why it stinks. It's just not. I'm more focused on what I'm enjoying about the game. Like I'm playing Tomb Raider right now, Rise of the Tomb Raider, adoring every moment of that game. And I would rather spend my time talking about that because that's when my time's invested. So it does carry over to film. It carries over it's kind of who I am. And you very much on this show are who you are. And I think when you stop putting on a persona and just started relaxing and being you, you're right, it's risk-taking. It's risk-taking and saying, I'm going to say the goofy thing that I would say, as I do many times on this show, as you do many times on the show, and have fun with it. Half the fun is learning how to laugh at yourself. And I think that taking it back cyclical to what he mentioned in the beginning, I think it's because you start to realize your listening audience are people that you want to be your friends. And the only way that's going to happen is if you're honest with them and genuine and you start being you. And when Brett calls, he's our friend. He's calling up and, he's sharing with us his honest thoughts. And we're communicating with him and sharing ours. And that's where it does turn into a friendship. I think it's very much that. It's a unique way to make connections, but that's why we're here. You and I could have this conversation on the telephone or in person. We do this on a podcast because of the audience, I think. And that's one of the interesting things when you first start a podcast. Your numbers are very small. I remember when we first hit double digits, we're like, there's more than 8 people listening. It turns into triple digits and 4 digits and beyond. That's the part where just knowing there's people listening, however small the audience is initially, it makes it rewarding because you're talking to somebody. If our numbers went to 0, that would be the end of it. Yeah. But it is those friendships that he's talking about. You said some very kind words, though, about the show and all of that. And it really is, it seems trite when you say this, but the listening audience really is a big factor in this. We have a very quiet crowd that listens to this show that they might listen to every episode. They might listen casually. They, just because of life or maybe listening to lots of podcasts, they don't participate. And that's perfectly fine. We love that. I mean, to know that there's an audience out there that listens to the show, obviously well beyond the people that participate, makes it fun to do this. We have a more intimate relationship with people that call in and they post on the Facebook group and things like that. I love that the Facebook group has kind of become its own subcategory of people that have taken it and they went in their own direction. It's kind of like building, when we talked about Brent, BK's Bullets building into its own thing. The Facebook group went into its own thing. I'm like part of a Santa Claus gift exchange that Jeremy threw up there, which I'm super excited about. There's like a Secret Santa thing up there. I got to do my Elfster today, so I have like a list of items on there. I don't know who has me, but I have somebody, and I'm excited to this week pursue getting them a gift. It's a random thing that I didn't initiate it. Jeremy did. I happened to come across it on the forums or the Facebook group, and it's totally being run by them. It's their thing. I'm just, like I've said many times on the show, and I mean it, it's grown into its own thing, and I actually kind of like that better. Because then it just becomes a community of friends that, like, great. It's nice that we had some small role in that thing kicking off. This is part of the fun of doing this. It's why we keep coming back. And thank you for the congrats on 500, heading to the road to 500 shows. If anything, this has reinvigorated us. It's amazing to be almost at 11 years of podcasting. And I have no feeling about stopping this at all. If anything, I'm more excited now to record than I've ever been. And that says a lot. And that does have a lot to do with our audience community. I know I'm rambling on about this, but it's really important to me. So it's kind of cool. So thanks, Brett. As always good to hear from you, and talk to you soon. Jim, this next voicemail is from Russell, and the reason why I'm doing a quick introduction for it, the first few seconds of this got cut off. Sometimes when you call on a cell phone into a voicemail or something like that, some of it's garbled. It did to a certain point. Then he starts talking about some of the television shows and kicks into talking about World of Krypton, and that's where everything got clear again. And it's a great phone call. I just wanted to introduce it and just say that because I was so happy when I'm like, oh, good, it's getting clear again. I can hear it on there. So, Russell, if there's anything that was missed in the beginning of your phone call, please call in for our next episode, and I'll be happy to get it on, and we'll continue that part of the discussion as well. It just got cut off and garbled at the beginning. So thanks for calling in as always.
The new World of Krypton show that's coming on Sci-Fi, and then iZombie song will be coming back, I guess, eventually. But I also wanted to talk to you about the new DC Rebirth, and I am gushing over Aquaman. Aquaman is incredible. This is by far the best run I've ever read of Aquaman. It's right on par with the Peter David stuff, which was pretty awesome. I also like to rage about the new Teen Titans with that Putz, Damian Wayne. I love him because he is so nefarious of how he got this new group together. You just got to love this guy. Also like to discuss the concepts of where DC Rebirth stand compared to where 52 stand. At this point in time, after 6 months with 52, at my conversation, we had a lot of complaints. Guys was ready to bail. But 6 months of the Rebirth, I'm hearing nothing but gushing. I'm not hearing any really negative comments, anything that's horrible about the line. I think most people are happy with this stuff. So if they can just keep this run up and keep it going, I think these will be fine. And I'd like to thank you all. I had a buddy who was listening to your podcast. And through your podcast, we actually contacted each other again because he heard my voice on your podcast and reached out to me to Facebook. And I hadn't talked to this guy in about 25 years. So I have to thank you for that because, without your podcast, I never would have got back in contact with my longtime friend. And I thank you guys for that. I mean, again, you replaced one of my great comic book buddies, and then now you got me meeting buddies that I haven't talked to in a long time. So until next time, make my raging bullet. Y'all have a pleasant day.
That is sweet.
I know, that's awesome.
I mean, just the fact that, because, listen, I'm very realistic about the fact that we're a very niche show. I mean, we cover one comic company, so we knew that when we started this. So we're not like the audience numbers of somebody that would cover all of comics. We're a niche within a niche. We're lucky that because of our listening audience, we've become successful over the years because of word of mouth and things like that. But I'm kind of floored by that one, that somebody reconnected with a friend through our podcast, and I think that's really cool. So thank you for sharing that. His comments about Aquaman are absolutely 100% accurate. Loving this run. I think they've really gotten to the core of what I think is great about Aquaman and what I love about the character. So it does feel very reminiscent of what I enjoyed about Peter David's run. I think it's an edgy book. It gets to the core of Aquaman. Aquaman's just a great character, and we got to talk about that in an upcoming show. Let's revisit Aquaman again. I know our next show is going to be, well, we might as well talk about it now. We're going to talk about the upcoming TV shows crossover, but we've got to get Aquaman on, I think, over the next month to talk about that book, because I'm loving what's going on there.
I agree. It's funny because as he was going, I'm like, man, we gotta put that on the list. That's got to be next on the talk when we talk some comics.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny how there's so many books right now that I do want to talk about, and Aquaman just happens to absolutely be one of them. We're going to have an interesting time trying to discuss. That's why I brought back Speeding Bullets, though, too, because I think there's things during the week organically that would be, you and I might read and go, I haven't talked about this book in a while. Let's make sure we talk about it and get that on the show, just because of that bit. I think it gives us some more freedom, which is why that segment needed to be back. But I want to remind everyone, our show voicemail line is 1-440-388-4434, or Dr. Norge on Skype. We love having you part of the show. Honestly, voicemails are a biggie for me. I like the interactivity. I do totally agree with Brett's sentiments that I consider all of you our friends. So please, whether you're a regular caller or you've never called in before, feel free to use that voicemail line. We like airing all the voicemails, and I certainly love having this segment because it is our chance to interact with you. So feel free to call into the show, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Look! Big tiny earthling comes to challenge us. Stamp him out like an insect.
I would like to remind everyone about our show website. It's ragingbullets.com. It links to our Facebook page, and it also links to our Twitter. So if you're fans of those services, feel free to follow us on those particular services. Also want to mention, of course, as always, our Facebook group. We share that with infinitecomics.com. Wonderful community of people over there. It's really their group. If you haven't been part of a Facebook group community before, you definitely want to check out the gang over there. It's just such a wonderful group of people. I love popping in and checking out what's going on. Great conversation. I find out usually a lot of news and things that I didn't know because there's commentary already going on about it. There's an immediacy to that group. It's a wonderful, amazing, fun group of people. We talk on this episode on one of the voicemails about people feeling like people are your friends. And I feel like there's so many like-minded people there who just love this medium and just geek culture in general that I just feel like every time I see a post there, I'm like, oh, there's a cool connection to the dialogue that's going on. Whether you agree with everything that everybody says or not, there's been times where I've had debates with people over there who I really respect. And I love the fact that we just have that honest, open dialogue. A lot of times it's about speculations, the same junk you and I do on here. Where it's, you and I debating over some nonsensical thing. But to us, it's important. And I think that's one of the great things about the community. It's a safe group of people to chat and share your thoughts and ideas about things that are going on in comics right now between the pages. And I just can't encourage you enough to join up with that group. We're on Google+. I have my PlayStation Network account. Feel free to connect with us whatever way is the best for you, and we love having you part of the show. I also do want to take a quick moment, as we're heading close to our 500th episode, to just kind of reiterate something I said a little earlier on this podcast. I want to thank the listener community. We don't have an advertising budget, and we have an audience. And where that audience comes from, initially it's people just searching for DC Comics related podcasts, but eventually it becomes word of mouth. And so many of you post in forums, Facebook groups, Google Plus communities, Twitter, whatever. You retweet, you shout us out in places. That really is where we get our audience from. And you have been the backbone of helping build this podcast. Wherever you jumped in, you let one person know about this show. It helps. So I just want to thank everyone for that. extra amount of time on your end where there was something that we said or some value you found in, whether you listen to every episode or certain segments or whatever, some value that you found it was worth shouting out to somebody else, we really appreciate that because it just points people towards our podcast. We're a niche show. We're not for everybody. Don't need to be. I want to be for the audience that finds value in what we do. And we really rely heavily on you to help point people to this show that might be interested. So thank you so much for doing that. It's just something I don't shout out enough on the show, and I thought this is a good time to, as we head to 500, thank you for providing that for us, because it's something that we do greatly appreciate. Sponsoring this episode once again, Jim, is dcbservice.com and instocktrades.com. What are our friends at DCB Service doing now?
Well, they're continuing their bundles, and it's actually a wonderful way for you guys, for the Rebirth titles, for the Vertigo, for the Young Animals. They bundle them. They give you some great bundle packages, 50% off, great way to save some money. But also, speaking of 50% off, they've got something else that's 50% off, and that is the Justice League Power Rangers, issue number 1 of the 6-issue miniseries, 50% off, only $199. Thank you, thank you, thank you. DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, once again, I mentioned the deals of the week earlier. They also have the latest releases section, which is always fun for me as well, because this is where I check out what have I missed that's just come out. Just for an example, they have the Batman Arkham Knight trade paperback, volume 3, 45% off, only $9.34. These are stories that are connected to the recent video game release, and I love these. They have things like the Complete Suiciders, the Big Shake trade paperback, 45% off, only $16.49. Black Canary, Volume 2 trade paperback. New Killer Star, 45% off, only $8.24. This is a great way, if you've missed certain series, you've been wanting to read certain series, to check them out. I can't recommend enough just browsing through the site, whether it's, you're looking for DC, Marvel, Image, whatever. Just checking out and honestly, all through comics. It's a great site to go to look for deals on the things that are interesting to you. They're constantly running specials, and for a hobby that really is about exploring and reading as much as you possibly can, it's a big help. I actually love the amount of content that I have comic-wise, because I have very diverse tastes, and the only way to be able to do that is through these discounts. So thank you, DCB Service and InStockTrades.com, for supporting our show. Jim, our next episode, we are going to do, actually it's a requested episode. We've had a number of listeners who have sent us messages saying, hey, would you guys do something on the upcoming 4-part TV crossover? Yes, that's our next show. We're going to chat about the 4-part TV crossover from Supergirl all the way through to Legends of Tomorrow. The Invasion episode that looks like it's coming up. So we will see everyone next week with that.
Bye!
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can two grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. With Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Segulin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of You-Know. It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.